자, SAT 수학 이번에 시험 친 거 질문을 좀 받아볼게요. 문제가 있었던 문제들이 좀 있죠. 7번, 섹션 3, 7번, 9번, 14번은 쉬워가지고 그냥 다 맞는 걸로 했고 문제 자체가 어렵진 않아서 다시 고쳐줘도 여러분이 충분히 풀 수 있는 사람들이고 11번 같은 경우는 잠깐만 볼게요. 11번 같은 경우에는 point O is the center 해가지고 마지막에 what is the length of arc AB라고 보면 돼요. arc AB. Yeah. arc AB죠. of R하고 나왔지만 arc면은 여러분 뭐고 하면 돼? 이렇게 있는데 A가 있고 B가 있으니까 이 arc를 구하라는 거죠. 이 length. 근데 뭐 충분히 할 수 있죠. 여기가 30이니까, 그렇지? 여기는
30.
똑같이 30이겠지? 왜냐하면
120.
120? Because those two are the same because isosceles. Why?
Because there's the A is a chord, and both AO and BO converge at the center.
Yeah, and those two are radius. Radius. So that's why it's isosceles, and it's 30, 30. So this middle here is 120. 오케이. 그러니까 R 값 나오겠죠? 어렵지 않죠? radius 몇이야?
Radius 18.
18이죠. radius 18이니까. circle 문제에서는 그냥 결국 다 radius로 거의 다 풀려요. radius 때문에 isosceles 됐지. radius로 우리 전체 circumference 구할 수 있죠. 그러고 앵글로 바로 arc 구하면 되니까. 오케이? 좋아요. 그러니까 문제 있는 문제들은 아까 불러준 거고 11번도 사실은 여러분이 충분히 풀 수 있지만 문제가 어쨌든 워딩이 잘못 나왔으니까 그것도 맞은 걸로 했어요. 11번은 풀 수 없는 거였고, 그치? 14번이구나. 오케이. 그리고 질문 받을게요. 20. Section 4, 20? 3, 20. 오케이. 3에 20. Exponential function f is defined by ft equals b squared, where b is a constant greater than 1. If f8, 16, f6, what is the value of b? 사실 이것도 문제가 좀 이상하기는 한데, 그죠? 왜냐하면 ft라고 그랬는데 t가 들어가 있지가 않네. equation에. If b is a constant, b 자체가 결국에는 그런데 이게 잠깐만요. 이거 혹시 답 나와 있나요 지금? 20에 답 몇이라고 나와 있지? 4? 오케이. 왜냐하면 얘도 문제가 좀 이상하긴 하네. 자, 그 매튜 혹시 뭐 어떻게 풀어봤어 이거 풀 때는?
처음에 I did f8 equals b squared because if b is the constant, then if it's the ft value, then and there's no t, then that's the only value
Yeah.
you can get for both f8 and 16.
Right.
And then I just stopped because I couldn't.
그치. 왜냐면 if f8 is b squared, f6 would also be b squared, right? So it'll be b squared equals 16b squared. And that could only be 0. 그치? b squared 0여야 되는데, 그쵸? 사실 한번 우리가 예상을 해보자면 선생님 생각에는 it should be ft equals bt because it's an exponential function, right? And so if f8 it should be b8 and f6 would be b6. So if b8 equals 16 times b6, it'll be b squared equals 16. So b is 4. Got it? I mean, you could have inferred from the question because it says it's an exponential function. 그죠? 그러니까 it should be t. 이것도 문제가 잘못된 거니까 사실은 못 풀었을 거예요. 오케이. 아, 네네. 그래서 매스 몇 개 틀렸어요? 이거 하나?
이거는 it says it's correct, even though I didn't solve it.
It's correct?
I didn't solve it, but it
It's
was
문제
오케이.
이상 있는 거.
네네네. 네네, 좋아요. 자, 20도 오케이, 좋아요. 이런 식으로 풀면 돼. exponential function이기 때문에 the variable has to go in the exponent. 알겠지? 그래야지 exponential function이죠. 오케이. 또 질문 있는 사람? 질문 또 있어요?
6번
섹션
section 4.
4의 16번 봅시다. 이 문제는 풀 수 있지, 그지? 어려운 문제 아니죠? 자, 같이 보자. 읽어볼까, 매튜?
A company produces board games and sells them online in stores. The quadratic function P models a company's monthly profits Px and thousands are produced and sold. The graph of y equals Px where 25 to 55 is shown in the XY plane above. How many board games must the company produce and sell in order to earn maximum profit estimated by the model?
Okay, so where is the maximum profit?
It's at 1,400,000.
그렇죠? 그러니까 이 vertex가 우리가 찾는 maximum profit이잖아, 그렇지? 여기만 찾으면 돼. 근데 뭘 찾으랬어? The real question is how many board games. 그러니까 x 값을 구하라는 거죠, 이거에. 여기까지는 이해됐어요? 이걸 못 구했어요? 왜냐하면 우리가 vertex를 구하는 방법이 두 가지가 있어요. vertex 구하는 방법 뭐 있어? 하나.
B over negative 2a.
vertex 폼으로 만드는 게 이게죠, 그죠? vertex 폼은 어떻게 생기는지 알아요? y equals
Y equals a times
what is it?
ax squared plus
vertex form. vertex form. 이렇게 만들면 vertex가 몇이에요? vertex가 h, k가 되는 거야. vertex. vertex가 이렇게 우리가 standard form이 원래 y equals ax squared plus bx plus c잖아. 그거를 vertex form으로 바꾼 다음에, 그러니까 perfect square로 만든 다음에 보면은 h, k가 vertex인 거 알 수 있고, 또 두 번째 방법. 아까 매튜가 얘기하려던 게 뭐예요?
b over negative 2a.
b over
negative
2a.
2a.
이게 뭐예요?
equation x and p.
그래서 vertex에 뭐라는 거야?
x value.
x죠? 그치? 그런데 이거 우리가 이 a와 b는 어디에 나와 있는 a와 b야?
ax squared.
그치? 스탠다드 폼이죠. 그죠? 여기서 a와 b를 알아야 되는데 근데 우리 둘 다 식을 모르네? 여기 우리 그래프밖에 없잖아. 당연히 quadratic이죠. quadratic. quadratic에서는 우리가 항상 그래프가 어떻게 생겼어? 파라볼라죠? 그죠? 파라볼라는 항상 어때? symmetric 하단 말이야. symmetric 하니까 이건 어디겠어? center of these two겠죠. 알겠죠? 여기 지금 difference가 몇이야? 30이니까 여긴 몇이겠어요? 40가 나오겠죠. 항상 파라볼라가 symmetric 하기 때문에 우리가 오히려 two roots를 알면 two zeros를 알면 중간에 vertex는 바로 나오는 거야. 알겠죠? 중간에 vertex는 바로 x값이 나오니까 y값은 이것도 집어넣으면 y값 나오겠죠. 그러니까 그래프를 보고 푸는 방법은 symmetry를 활용해서 풀면 돼요. 오케이? 좋아요. 그런데 우리가 중요한 것도 여기서 당연히 여기 40라고 써 있어서 40를 그냥 바로 쓰면 안 되겠지? 이게 뭐 주관식이었으면 40,000으로 잘 써주시고요. 오케이. 또 혹시 뭐 헷갈리는 문제는 없었어요?
없었어요.
괜찮아요? 할만했어?
네.
오케이. 우리 그 온라인으로 보고 있는 친구는 혹시 질문이 있나요? 없어요? 질문 없어요? 수학? 오케이. 다들 공부 잘하는구만. 매튜 이 문제만 맞았으면 되는 거야 그러면?
네.
아쉽네.
잘못 읽었어요.
잘못 읽었어? 뭘 잘못 읽었어?
I didn't read the how many board games they need to sell.
What did you read?
Maximum profit.
One thing I told you one thing. The most important question is the real question. 그죠? How many board games라고 했으니까 그렇지? 그래서 항상 우리가 X축이 뭔지 Y축이 뭘 나타내는지 지금 Y축은 뭐예요?
Profit
Profit이고 X축이
is
the number of board games. 그죠? 이거 잘 확인해. 그래프에서는 항상 이거 확인해야 돼. 알겠죠? 항상 그리고 유닛도 여기 보면 thousand로 나오죠 방금. 여기는 thousand로 나왔으니까 여기 곱해주는 것도 마지막에 이런 거 가끔씩 문제로 나온단 말이야. 오케이. 그럼 수학은 다들 잘 맞았고 다른 거 뭐 좀 문제 있던 문제는 없어요 그러면? 섹션 4에서 문제 있는 문제 없었나? 섹션 4는 할만했어요?
네.
섹션 3만 좀 그랬구나.
네.
오케이. 그래요. 그때 그래서 매튜 문제 풀어왔어요? exponential이랑 compound interest랑
네.
percent.
I did was it the statistics thing, and I needed to do the percentage.
So where is it?
어,
At home? 가져와서 채점 받으세요 그거.
네.
채점 받고 문제 질문 있으면 그때 또 해도 되니까. 알죠? 오케이. 이거 조심하세요. vertex form minus b over 2a 그리고 parabola symmetric 쓰는 거. 오케이. 고생했어. 다른 거 질문 있으면 언제든지 하시고요. 오케이. 그러니까 아는데 그러니까 못 잘못 봐서 틀린 거지 그러면. 아는데. 오케이. 그러면 안 돼. 알았지? real question 항상 제일 집중해서 real question이니까 underline 해줘. underline 한 번씩 해주고. 알겠죠? 고생했습니다.
not corona, but but yeah. All right, so you said you read the question wrong on the math section.
Yeah.
Well, no, it's not a viable excuse. You know that. Okay, so, well, I mean, you guys already probably know, but you can't really say that it's a mistake, okay? Okay, if you get 800 three consecutive times, then fine, you're allowed to make a mistake. But if it's not, but if you didn't do this, did you, if you consistently get one or two wrong, that's a problem that you can't solve unless you do something about it. So you should at least you should consciously slow down on the questions. That's one thing you can do. Or what I like to do, when okay, so you guys probably have a lot of time left on the math section, right? Like you get at least like 15 minutes left, or something like that. In that case, what you should do is see this. If this is your page, and then you have a question here, you have a question here, question here, question here. You can solve it down here if it's question 1, 2, 3, 4, for example. You can solve it here, so that you can, when you're solving it again for some of the questions that you're unsure of, or if you know that you consistently make a mistake on one of a specific type of problem, you want to just make a note. Say, for example, I don't know, like if it talks about like interests or something like that, and you get that question consistently wrong, then just make a note of it even before you solve it, and solve that question down here. Because once you make a mistake, you're looking at a question in the wrong perspective, and even if you go back and try solving that question again, you can't look at the question with a fresh frame of mind. So in order to do that, for at least the questions that you consistently get wrong, if there are any, I'm saying go down. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to take a look at the second passage. Okay. 건이랑 유나랑 다 들려? 들리면은 메시지 하나만 해줘. Okay, so we're not going to start off with the first passage. We're going to start off with the second passage, okay? First passage, there were some tricky things, but I want to take a look at the second passage while we're still fresh, okay? And this one might seem like it's difficult, but it's really not, okay? Okay. Okay, so a little bit of background knowledge. Since you took U.S. history,
I didn't.
You didn't.
No.
You didn't. Wait, where did you learn about U.S. history then?
Books.
Books. Okay, what kind of books?
History books. I used to read a lot of them when I was.
Okay, what kind of history? Okay, so what's this muckraking thing that they're talking about? Have you heard of this one?
No.
Okay, so muck raking, and they say muck rake. I don't know if it's with a C or without a C. Like I know, like here it's misspelled here. Like okay, so this one I changed it for the test, but anyway, muck. Okay, I think it's this muckrakers. Yeah. Okay, so who are the muckrakers? Okay, so muckrakers, you know the saying, I know how the sausage is made. Have you ever heard of that phrase?
No.
Okay, so when people say, hey, I know how the sausage is made, like let's say for example, you're like a pastor's kid, PK. You know what
Yeah.
a pastor's kid is? Yeah. So if your dad's a pastor, you're a pastor's kid, right? So if you say, like PKs, some PKs, they don't go to church. Some PKs, like when they're old, and you ask them, okay, why don't you go to church? And they say, I've seen too much. I know how the sausage is made. Okay? That means I know like the things that go behind the scenes, right? Where did that come from? Well, there was this guy called Upton Sinclair, who wrote The Jungle. Okay? This was about the meatpacking industry. Okay? It was about the meatpacking industry and how unsanitary their process was, and how dangerous it was for the workers, and like all the bad things going inside sausages and that kind of thing. So he wrote a book about this, right? And then there was like this public outrage and that, and then they had the Food and Drug Administration. It's largely because of this book. So it was like a really sensational book back then. This is like the early, so the late 1800s and early 1900s. So that's what they call the progressive era. Have you heard of that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the progressive era is after the Gilded Age. Remember when we talked about the Gilded Age? So the Gilded Age, during the Gilded Age, this was usually like a very big business friendly, and people working long hours in the factories and that kind of thing, right? But they didn't have any checks on the big corporations. So they used like child labor. Everybody used to work over like 16 hours in the factories and that kind of thing. You don't get paid well. And so after the Gilded Age, it doesn't pertain to the left side or the left side or the right. All sides of the political spectrum, they said, hey, we need to fix this. We need to fix this problem. Let's start addressing these social issues and that kind of thing. And that's when they go into the progressive era. So they try to solve all the problems, all the corruptions, all the social issues, that kind of thing. They're trying to solve all of these during the progressive era. That's the early 1900s. Okay, and and the muckrakers, like I said, these people are people who try to expose all the corrupt things that the politicians are doing, or like this guy, what the corporations are doing wrong, that kind of thing. That's their focus, right? So investigative journalism, right? Like in Korea, they have like 그것이 알고 싶다, or like PD 수첩. Well, 그것이 알고 싶다, they really focus on like murder investigations and that kind of thing. But sometimes like they go into like, I don't know, like factories, and they say, oh, look how dirty this is. Like, oh, and that's like investigative journalism. So that this is like the progressive era was like the beginning of the investigative journalists, and the muckrakers was another name for the investigative journalists. And who coined that term? This guy. In this passage, he coins that term, muckrakers. Okay, so after he delivered this speech, people started calling them muckrakers, the investigative journalists. Okay, so it's about that. So investigative journalism. What's his opinion on this? Okay, so let's take a look. So when we're reading history passages, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be accounting for every single idea. Okay, accounting for every single idea. We're trying to put a number on everything. So one thing that you should be aware of even if you feel like they're talking about the same thing over and over again, if you find a point of if you feel like the passage itself is pretty monotonous, if it's just going along the same notes, still you need to find the fine distinctions. And if you don't account for the passage 100%, if you don't read the passage, if you kind of just read it and say, okay, so this is like the flow that it's going with. If 그렇게 대충 보면은 you're gonna be unsure when you face the questions. So when you face the questions, you should have that 100% certainty that you have the passage down to every note, right? So that's how we're gonna take a look at this passage. Okay, so again, don't focus on the passage, focus on the methodology. Try practice. We're practicing how to look at a passage. We're not necessarily trying to understand, like, okay, so yeah, fine, you're gonna get like difficult questions over and over again, but like, what's the point of talking about difficult questions? What's the point of me explaining to you guys difficult sentences when you're not gonna see this sentence ever again? Right? So let's take a look. Okay. So he talks about this book, right? He talks about this book, and then there's this character, the man with the muckrake. Okay. So this one is spelled wrong. Muckrake is set forth as the example of him whose vision. Okay. So he is an example of something. This person is an example of something whose vision is fixed on carnal instead of spiritual things. Okay. So what do we see here? We see a contrast. Whenever you see any kind of contrast in a passage, you want to take note of that. Carnal, he focuses on the carnal instead of the spiritual. Okay, so that's how you want to look at this person. Okay, so if you look at the Pilgrim's Progress, there's the man with the muckrake. So I'll just say this guy is MMR, right? So what do you know about MMR? This person focuses on the carnal and not the spiritual. Okay? Yet, he also typifies the man who in this life consistently refuses to see aught that is lofty. Okay, so lofty goes along with this. He doesn't see the lofty and fixes his eyes with solemn intentness only on that which is vile, debasing. Okay, so this is the contrast that you should have gotten out of this, right? So this person, but okay, so when you're reading this sentence, you should tell yourself, okay, we're not talking about anything new. He set up this contrast in the sentence before this, and we're not really going off of that, right? I mean, we're not off track. We're still on that idea. So I don't need to account for another idea here. I just know, okay, so this person is just saying, okay, so the man with the muckrake focuses on the carnal and the vile debasing. I don't know what that means exactly, but this is what we have so far, okay? So let's take a look. Now, it is very necessary that we should not flinch from seeing what is vile and debasing. Okay, so he said, usually when you say like now, or obviously, or of course, it is true, all of those are concessions. Right? So in history passages, they say now a lot, right? Now let me say this, right? You make a concession. You admit to the opponent's point of view. That's what a concession is, right? So he's saying, yeah, we should not flinch. So we should desire from seeing what is vile and debasing. Okay, so he is making a concession saying, yes, this is necessary, right? So that concession is his next point. The next concession is, yes, this thing, us focusing on the carnal part, that is necessary. So if you did have that prior knowledge about the muckrakers and investigative journalism and everything, you would know exactly what he's talking about here. And that would have helped you immensely. So what is he talking about? He's talking about like the sensationalism that they're chasing after, these people, right? These people, they don't really focus on the lofty things. They want to see all the vile, debasing stuff that the corrupt politicians are doing, all the corporations are doing, and then that kind of thing. Okay? So he's saying, yes, this is kind of necessary. There is filth on the floor, and it must be scrapped up with the muck rake, and there are times and places where this service is most needed. Okay, so are we talking about a different thing? No, he's just saying, yeah, there is filth. Okay, a lot of typos here, but I don't think it should be a problem here. There is filth on the floor, and we need it, right? We need to clean that up. So he's saying it's necessary because we need to clean the filth. That's what he's trying to say. Are we on a different point yet? No, not yet, right? He's just talking about, he's just admitting to the necessity of focusing on the filth of why we need to take care of this. But, okay, so starting from here, probably this is going to be the next point. But the man who never does anything else, who never thinks or anything else other than the vile, debasing thing, the filth, right? And if he doesn't focus on anything else, who never thinks or speaks or writes, save, except, right? Except of his feats with the muck rake, speedily becomes not a help, but one of the most potent forces for evil. Okay, so that's the point that he really, really wants to make. So if these are all fine, and we need this, but the point that he wants to make is if you get narrow-minded and you focus only on that, if you focusing only on the filth is evil. That's what he's saying. Okay, so these 3 points. So very simple structure here, right? So he's saying, this is what they do, right? This is what they do. They focus on this. Yeah, it is necessary, but focusing only on that, that's going to lead to evil, right? So that's the point that we have here. Okay, so let's go to the next paragraph. So when you go to the next paragraph, you should expect to see the structure. I mean, he's not going to elaborate on this forever and ever. Probably we're going to have some new points, or potentially, I don't know, he's going to rephrase this. There are in the body politic, economic, and social many and grave evils. Okay, so he's admitting to this, right? So many and grave evils. And there is urgent necessity for the sternest war upon them. Okay, so there are evils and necessity of war upon these evils, right? So we need to fight this. Okay, so this is not necessarily so different from the second point that he made in the first paragraph. You should be familiar with this idea by now, right? There should be relentless exposure of an attack upon every evil man. Okay, is that a different thing? No, it's the same point. It's the same point. So I can move on. Whether politician or businessman, right? So, so he's talking about specifically, so even if this, we should focus on the evils of the politician, we should focus on the evils of the businessman, every evil practice, whether in politics, in business, or in social life. Okay, so we need to focus on them. I hail as a benefactor every writer or speaker, every man who on the platform so benefactor is someone who helps you, right? So this person is saying, hey, I really appreciate these people, right? So who does he appreciate? Every man who on the platform or in a book, blah, 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 with merciless severity makes such attack. Right? So attack on these evil people, right? Okay, same thing, right? So he's just saying, I appreciate the people who do this. There's a need to do this. I appreciate the people who do this, right? Provided always that be in his its turn remembers that the attack is of use only if, right? So remember this, okay? So remember the conditional. Remember the conditionals. So, all right, let's try this. Okay, if A then B, right? So this is the sufficient condition. This is the necessary condition, right? 충분 필요 조건, right? How do we write this? We write it like this. What can we deduce from this? What? If not B, then not A, right? Okay, so let's talk about different ways to write this. Can you think about all the different ways that you can write this? Okay, so we have one, right? If A, then B. This is the most basic form. What are the other things?
If only A, then B. If only A, then B.
If only A? If only A?
Then B.
No, well, that would be the same as this one.
Oh,
And we didn't talk about that. So you should be able to, so you need to memorize this. Just recognizing them, okay, like you're taking a gamble because if you can't remember this off the top of your head, you're likely to make a mistake, okay? So there was the only A is B. So which one is the, did I write this right? Is this? Or is this wrong? Do I need to switch it into B and A?
the only B is A.
The only B is A, right? No, you're wrong. See, this is right. Okay, the only A is B. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Remember?
Yeah.
Okay, so the slash means not A. Okay, so not A unless B. So we need B. We need B. B is the necessary condition for A to happen, right? So did you write that down? Okay. Well, so okay, the necessary conditions comes after this, right? So he appreciates every man, right? He appreciates every man, provided always that B in his turn remembers that the attack is of use. Attack is of use only if, so it is absolutely truthful, right? So he's saying it's of use only if it's truthful. So what if it's not truthful? Then it's not useful. That's what he's trying to say, right? So the next point that he was trying to say is he thinks of them as benefactors, right? But the point that he wants to get across here is that they're only of use only if you are truthful. So if you're not truthful, you're of no use. Right? Okay. So he's talking about journalists, right? So if you're just going after like petty sensationalism, if you just want to shock people, that's all you want to do, and you add your own lies into it, you're not being truthful, then it's not really useful for the people, right? Okay, so let's take a look at the next part. The liar is no better than the no better than the thief. Okay, so he's just trying to emphasize what he just said, right? So I know that. I know he's just adding on to the strength of this statement, right? He just wants to emphasize this so I don't need to necessarily account for this idea. It's worse than the thief, and if his mendacity takes the form of slander meaning you're just trying to hurt someone's reputation. He may be worse than most thieves, right? All right, so he's just elaborating on this idea. Do I need to take account of that? No, not really. You can just tell yourself it's the same idea. It puts a premium upon knavery untruthfully to attack an honest man, right? Okay, same thing, right? If you attack an honest man, what are you doing, right? Or even with hysterical exaggeration. So this is bad. Attacking an honest man is bad, right? Or even with hysterical exaggeration to assail a bad man. So even if you're attacking a bad man, if you exaggerate it, if you're not being truthful, that's not good. So he's just talking the contrapositive here. That's nothing new. Like the next point that he says is, hey, if you're not being truthful, then, that's not really of use. But when he's saying not truthful, he's using the word attack an honest man, right? Attack honest, and if you exaggerate. So that's of no use to us, right? And then it says, an epidemic of indiscriminate assault. Indiscriminate meaning you're not so careful in choosing who you want to attack, right? You just attack everybody. If you just attack everybody, assault upon character does not good, but very great harm, right? So it does no good. It does harm. Same idea. I'm not past this yet, right? The soul of every scoundrel is gladdened whenever an honest man is assailed. Okay, so here he's talking about the characteristic of scoundrels, like the bad man, right? So what's the characteristic of a scoundrel, quote unquote? Scoundrel is glad whenever someone is honest man is assailed, or even or when someone else, like an evil person, is untruthfully assailed even, right? So this person just hates other people, right? So when they're attacked, he celebrates that. It's glad when others are attacked. Okay, so this is the next idea that we have. Okay, so and then it says, now it is easy to twist out of shape what I have just said. Okay, so we've seen this over and over again. Especially when we were reading Lincoln, we've seen a lot of these. What do you call this? What's about to follow? No.
Let me not be misunderstood.
Yes, what is that? Yes, it's clarifying. It's clarifying a claim. So he's saying, so he said all of this, and usually, like especially in Korea, you want to be careful with your words because people just take something out of context and they start attacking it. So he's just saying, hey, okay, it's easy to twist out of shape what I've just said, right? Just understand me clearly. Easy to misunderstand it, and if it is slurred over in repetition, not difficult really to misunderstand it. So he's talking about the possibility that he might be misunderstood. So he's going to say, hey, this is what I'm not trying to say. This is what I'm trying to say, right? I'm not trying to say A, I'm trying to say B. So let's get that clear here, right? So there's going to be that clarification. All right, so what's the clarification? Some persons are sincerely incapable of understanding that to denounce mudslinging, okay, so mudslinging is just, you throw mud at people, right? So you're just attacking people. That's what mudslinging is. Okay, so some people do not understand that mudslinging does not mean the endorsement of whitewashing. Okay, so what does whitewashing mean? It's the opposite. I want to say opposite, but it's trying to 이미지 세탁, right? You're a really bad person, but okay, it's not like whitewashing in the sense that, you're a black person or you're like an Asian person, but you get whitewashed. No, not that whitewash. The whitewash we're talking about is you're actually like an evil person, but you want to appear to be an honest and good man, right? That's the whitewashing that he's talking about, right? So he's saying, hey, some people don't understand something, right? Some people don't understand that denouncing mudslinging. So that's what he did. He denounced mudslinging, right? He said just attacking people without any proper investigation, or if you're exaggerating stuff, blowing things out of proportion, that's bad, right? That's what he's been doing. He's been denouncing mudslinging, but he's saying that does not equal whitewashing. Okay, but some people don't understand that. Some people say, "Hey, why are you trying to protect those people? Why are you trying to whitewash them?" Right? Those people deserve that. But he's saying they're incapable of understanding that. And both the interested individuals who need whitewashing and those who practice mudslinging like to encourage such confusion of ideas. All right, so there's people, right? So the clarification that he wants to make is denouncing mudslinging is not equal to whitewashing. Okay? So what's whitewashing? You turn something negative into a positive, right? So you're like this really corrupt person. I don't know, but you're trying to like appear as if you're like this pure and innocent person. That's what whitewashing is. But he wants to make this distinction. But on the other hand, there are some people, right, who they don't understand this. They don't understand this nuance. Or they feel like that's going to serve their agenda. It's going to be helpful to them. That's what they think. Hey, let's make people confuse that so that, I can benefit from that. Okay? And then it says, one of the chief counts against those who make indiscriminate assaults upon men in business of men in public life is that, okay, so what's one of the chief counts is that they invite a reaction which is sure to tell powerfully in favor of the scrupulous scoundrel who really ought to be attacked. Okay, so the chief count against these people. Okay, so let's find out who those are first. Okay, so these people are people who make indiscriminate assault, right? So Theodore Roosevelt would hate these kind of people, right? Who make indiscriminate assaults, right? But the chief count against these people, what the claim against these people is that they invite a reaction which is sure to tell powerfully in favor of the scrupulous scoundrel who really ought to be attacked, right? So, they who ought to be exposed, who ought, if possible, to be put in the penitentiary. Right? So these people who should go to jail, right? Right. Okay. So what's the best way to explain this? Okay, so let's start here. So you get some kind of reaction, right? This day is going to be the people who make indiscriminate assaults, right? So these people make indiscriminate assaults, and that evokes a reaction. What kind of reaction is that? It actually favors like these bad people, right? These bad people who ought to be attacked and who ought to be exposed and that kind of thing. Okay, so I mean, let's I'll just tell you an example. Okay, so let's say we have 5 people, right? And then actually only this person is a bad person. No, let's say these 2 people are really bad people, and these 3 people, they're actually good people. Okay, but what would an indiscriminate assault do? When indiscriminate assault would attack all of them, right? And if we do this, if we attack all of them, that's going to lead to a reaction, right? So that reaction is going to be in favor of these people. Why? Because people are saying, hey, why are you guys attacking everybody? Right? That kind of thing. Why are you guys attacking? Like these journalists, they're just attacking everybody. Let these people go. So that's likely to be the reaction, is what he's trying to say. So we need to attack only these people. But if we attack everybody, the reaction is going to be favorable to these people, right? That's what he's trying to say here. Okay? Any excess is sure to invite reaction, and unfortunately, the reaction, instead of talking the form of punishment of those guilty, so this is what he wants, right? He wants to punish guilty people, is very apt to take the form either of punishment of the unoffending or of giving immunity to offenders, right? So that can lead to really bad reactions. So I'm just going to say indiscriminate assault, IA. Indiscriminate assault is going to have a negative consequence. It's going to evoke a reaction, and this reaction could potentially spare the people who actually deserve punishment of punishment, and they're actually going to probably even punish the unoffending people, right? So that, this is what we don't want, this negative reaction, right? We only want to punish the bad people. We don't want to punish the unoffenders, or we don't want to give immunity to the offenders. That's what he's trying to say. The effort to make financial or political profit out of the destruction of character can only result in public calamity. That's how he puts it. Okay, so the tone word is, there's a lot of tone words here. Remember when we see like really connotative diction, right? Like we talked about in our essay class, right? Connotative diction, when you see them, you want to take note of that, right? What's a calamity? Yeah, some kind of like a really disastrous thing, right? So that's how he puts it. Like this is a public calamity. So he's just saying, hey, just, I know. So it's, the whole gist of this passage is, I know that it's needed. I know that we need to attack people who deserve punishment, but if we indiscriminately attack these people, that's going to evoke a reaction. That's going to be a public calamity. We're not going to be able to punish the guilty people, and we're actually going to sometimes punish the unoffending people, right? Gross and reckless assaults on character, whether on the stump or in newspaper, magazine, or book, create a morbid and vicious public sentiment. This is how it happens, okay? So, all right, so that goes on. So his next point is going to be discussing this public calamity. So let's take a look at this public calamity. So how does this public calamity happen? So how does this disaster happen? Well, it's mostly in terms of creating a vicious public sentiment. What would that mean? Creating a vicious public sentiment.
Oh, it's invoking a lot of negativity.
Yeah, just people become very toxic, right? They're like, this is how instead of people just having like a generally peaceful disposition, that kind of thing, they just want to kill everybody, right? They just want to tear stuff down and that kind of thing, right? So, I'm not taking sides in terms of Korean politics here, but, it happened in the past, right? This vicious public sentiment. I don't know what the cause was. I don't know if it's the press or actually, I'm talking about when, like everybody hated Park Geun-hye and that kind of thing. Like that would be an example of a vicious public sentiment, right? Like that's something like that, right? And at the same time, act as a profound deterrent to able men of normal sensitiveness. Okay. And tend to prevent them from entering the public service at any price, right? And another thing that's going to happen as a result of this is you're going to deter what is it? Able men from going into public service, right? People are going to say, hey, all right, fine. I'm not going to be a politician or whatever because, you know, I've seen what happens. If you be a politician, everybody starts attacking you, the press starts attacking you, and I don't want anything to do with that, right? Okay, and then it says, as an instance and point. Okay, so as an instance, so he's probably going to be talking about some kind of example. Let's take a look how he does it. As an instance and point, I may mention that one serious difficulty encountered in getting the right type of men to dig the Panama Canal, okay, so he's talking about this as an example, right? Okay, is the certainty that they will be exposed both without and, I am sorry to say, sometimes within Congress to utterly reckless assaults on their character and capacity. Okay, so he talks about this as an example, right? So this is an example of that. You can leave it at that here, right? Because, you know, as an instance and point. So he's just trying to make the point that, hey, what I say is true, right? And then let's go to the last paragraph. What does it say? At the risk of repetition. All right. So I think he's going to be saying the same thing. At the risk of repetition, let me say again that my plea is not for immunity to, but for the most unsparing exposure of the politician. Okay, so he's saying, I'm not really saying give immunity to these people. What does immunity mean?
It means, how should I explain?
It means how should I explain it?
No,
That's actually wrong.
Like preventing, kind of.
Okay, so if you give immunity to someone, this usually happens in a lot of American shows. I've seen American movies or something like that. They get like this, they arrest like this drug dealer or something, and then they tell the drug dealer, hey, we won't send you to jail if you give us some information. We'll give you immunity if you give us some information. You ever seen something like that? Yeah. So he's saying, well, I'm not saying let's not prosecute these people, right? And I'm not saying we should not punish them, right? But I'm actually saying we should expose these people who betrays his trust of the big businessman who makes or spends his fortune in illegitimate or corrupt ways. So he's saying, yeah, I'm not saying immunity, I'm saying exposure. There should be a resolute effort to hunt every such man. So he does recognize the necessity of focusing on cleaning the filth, right? He wants to hunt every corrupt politician and big business, right? Expose the crime and hunt down the criminal, but remember that even in the case of crime, if it is attacked in sensational, lurid, and untruthful fashion, right? So if you do this, the attack may do more damage. So this is going to yield damage. So remember this cause and effect. That's what he's saying, right? So not doing it truthfully will actually damage it. It will not be of use, right? So it's basically repeating that point stated towards the beginning of the passage, right? So he's saying, yeah, I know it's necessary to expose all these people, but remember, it can have negative consequences if you don't do it truthfully. Okay, so the thing about this passage is, it's easy to just focus on that. So once you read this, you're like, okay, so he's saying the same thing over and over again. Not necessarily, because there were a lot of different points here, right? Well, what were the different points, right? So we talked about the characteristic of the scoundrel. Like, how do these people feel? They feel glad when others are attacked. And he said, he says, like, I mean, this bit, I guess, a little bit similar to that, but there was a slight difference in nuance. He's saying some people don't understand the fact that denouncing, what was MS? I forgot what this is. denouncing, let's just say indiscriminate assault or something. Okay, indiscriminate assault is not equal to whitewashing. But some people don't understand that. And the indiscriminate assault is always going to evoke a reaction, and that reaction is not going to be positive. It's going to be a public calamity, right? And then a lot of people are not going to go into public service if we do this, right? So he had this whole bit elaborated upon this idea. So if you don't get all these ideas, you can potentially get some questions wrong. If you just focus on the gist of this. If you just say, hey, this passage is about making that concession, but saying that focusing only on the filth is evil. You should not end the passage here because there's also some nuances that you need to catch. You get what I'm saying? All right, so let's take a look at some of the questions. I want to take a look at the first question, the primary purpose. Okay, so primary purpose of the passage. So when you're solving this, what you should do is just a true-false test, right? True-false. Just ask yourself, okay, you don't want to go back to the passage, right? So don't read A and go back to the passage. Don't read B and go back to the passage. Don't do that. Trust yourself, okay? Trust that you have all the ideas inside your head. You got the main idea. Let's just do a true-false test. Okay, so describe and analyze. Okay, fine. I mean, I can't really, fine, whatever. Describe and analyze. He could have described and analyzed anything. An alarming discovery. Okay, so can we say that that's a discovery, what he said? No. Well, I mean, a discovery is like a discovery. It's like finding something out. But no, he's not necessarily trying to say, hey, this is what I found out. No, he's trying to just say, hey, this is, let's do this truthfully, right? That kind of thing. B, identify and denounce a harmful practice. What would that harmful practice be? Attacking honest people, exaggerating these kind of things. That's going to have a negative consequence. So this is, of course, something that we talked about, and discovery I'm going to get rid of. What about C, solicit support? Solicit support, so saying people, hey, support this. I don't know. I don't really like it, but I'll just let it go for now. For a political initiative. Political initiative would be something that he's starting, like some kind of project that he's starting politically. Like, do we have anything like that? What is he doing politically? Is he launching a new policy? Is he starting a new movement? No. We didn't have anything like that, right? So that's gone. Praise those who seek to reveal social ills. Okay, so this one he did. But you need to remember that there was a but here, right? Right? So he did say, hey, these people are benefactors, right? But what was the more important thing? Here, right? How do we know this? Well, because the sentence structure, when it's, okay, so let's say this is clause number 1, clause number 2. We did this before, right? So this is one of our micro-reading methodologies. Point of emphasis. Where does the point of emphasis go? Does it go to 1 or 2? What's the more important one? Is clause 1 more important or clause 2 more important? Yeah, of course it's 2. So this was, I mean, this thing, praise those who seek to reveal social ills, that would be clause 1 in a sense. But there was a but, and then he mentioned that, but remember, if you do it wrong, that's going to damage us severely, right? So that's why it's B. Okay, so the question numbers are all squashed, but what's number 18? Is this number 18? Based on the passage, Roosevelt believes that his argument about efforts to expose wrongdoing is subject to which risk? All right. So how are we going to solve this? All right, so I don't know. First he gives us a key word here. Efforts to expose wrongdoing. And then that's going to have a risk. That's what we have. Okay, so let's check if we have a line reference question. Yes, we do have a line reference. So what are you going to do? Well, if you can answer, if you feel very confident, and if you can pre-phrase an answer before you look at the line reference, you can go ahead. But more likely than not, you're not going to know the answer for this, because this is going to be rather specific. So then what's my choice? Then I'm going to get this key phrase, and I'm going to tell myself, okay, I'm going to look for efforts to expose wrongdoing and the risk of that, right? So where do I find that in the line reference? That's how I should approach this, okay? So, but the thing is, when it comes to line reference questions, I always want to look at this in a very smart way, right? You can always, don't always start from A. If you feel like the question is asking something towards the latter part of the passage, you should start with D, right? So I'm not saying it's going to be D or C, but I'm saying you should start checking D first. You know what I mean? And I feel like if he's going to talk about the risk of anything, he would do that well into the passage instead of towards the beginning part. So I want to start looking from D. Okay, so I'm going to say, okay, so efforts to expose wrongdoing, and what kind of risk does that have? Okay, so 55 to 59 first. Okay, so let's take a look at that. 55 to 59, any excess is almost sure to invite reaction. And unfortunately, the reaction, instead of 55 to what?
55 to 59.
Okay, 55 to 59, so it's this sentence, right? All right, so what are we looking for? The question, the key phrase that we were looking for was, and then this thing has a risk, right? That's what we're looking for, right? Okay, so 55 to 59 again. Any excess is almost sure to invite reaction, and unfortunately, the reaction, instead of taking the form of punishment, is very apt to take form either of punishment of the unoffending or of giving immunity to offenders. Yes, this could potentially be an answer. So for answer choice A, you should take a note, right? For D, right? So for answer choice D, you should say, hey, a potential risk of exposing wrongdoing would be, you would be punish unoffending. And immunity to wrongdoers. All right, so this is my possible answer choice. What was the line reference for C?
44 to 47.
44 to 47. Let's take a look at 44. Starting from whitewashing? Where is it? And both. Okay, so and both the interested individuals who need whitewashing and those who practice mudslinging like to encourage such confusion of ideas. Okay, so people, the corrupt people, right, are the people who need whitewashing, right? So the corrupt people and the people who do the mudslinging, they would want people to be confused. Okay, so it's like wrongdoers want to confuse. So this is what I have, C and D, okay? And then I want to take a look at 33 to 35, okay? 33 to 35. An epidemic of indiscriminate assault of a character does not good, but very great harm. Okay, so it just said harm, right? Fine. So if you want to write that down, fine. But I really doubt that we can find an answer choice that says harm, right? but because you don't necessarily elaborate on this. So I'm just going to leave this. And then 30 to 33, it puts a premium upon knavery, untruthfully untruthfully to attack an honest man, or even with hysterical exaggeration to assail, right? Okay, so I mean, he's just saying, hey, you know, like it's this. Well, this part is not talking about the risk, right? So A should be gone. It would either be B, C, or D, but I'm not going to look at B because this one was way too general, and I know for a fact that the answer choices to question 18, they were pretty specific, so I can't really go along with B. So it's either going to be the wrongdoers want to confuse them, or you're going to punish the unoffending and you're going to grant immunity to the honest people. So let's take a look. Okay, so A says deliberate misrepresentation. Deliberate misrepresentation. So this part would be, so this would correspond to C, right? Because they want to confuse you, right? They would want to whitewash, right, themselves and that kind of thing. So that would be this by corrupt public figures and journalists. So this is the people who need, corrupt public figures are the ones who need whitewashing. Journalists would be the ones mudslinging. So this one would be okay. I want to check the other answer choices too, though. Be unintentional misrepresentation, misinterpretation. Okay. So I didn't talk about anything about something unintentional, right? So we didn't have any lack of intention here, so that's gone. C, unauthorized publication for financial profit. This is completely irrelevant. We never talked about any kind of financial profit. Unwanted endorsement by convicted. I don't know why we have convicted criminals here, right? So I don't see this answer choice. So that's why I would get rid of this, and I would choose C for the next one and A for this question. That's how you would go about it. Okay. Let's do 20, and then we'll take a break. Okay. In the passage, Roosevelt makes which assumption about social critics' relationship to society? Okay. So when they're asking you an assumption question, okay, so this is really rare because they don't usually ask you assumption questions when it comes to history passages. They usually ask you assumption questions when it comes to science passages. Okay, so what's an assumption?
It's a guess.
No. No. We talked about this many, many times. What's an assumption?
It's an assumed.
No. Okay, so it's an unstated premise. Do you remember this?
Unstated premise.
Yeah. We talked about this so many times. Unstated premise.
Oh, I remember.
Okay, so that's what an assumption is. It's an unstated premise. So it's something that you just take for granted that it's true. You don't necessarily say it, but they assume that it's true, right? That's what an assumption is, right? So what if that assumption is false? So that's the example that I always told you guys, right? If your mom comes up to you, she says, hey, you should have done your homework. What's her assumption? Her assumption is you did not do your homework. How do you ruin her argument? By telling her, I did my homework, right? Then her argument makes no sense. You should have done your homework, right? So what do we learn from here? If we negate an assumption, the author's opinion needs to fall apart. So I want to try negating these. Okay. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
If we try negating these, okay, so if we say social critics' relationship to society, Well, okay. So if we say social critics are not immune to political pressure, does his argument fall apart? Well, what's his argument to begin with? His argument to begin with was this, right? Okay, so, like, yeah, we need these people who focus on getting rid of the filth, right? We need to, yeah, this is good, right? These people are doing good, but if in order for you to be useful, you need to be truthful. If you're not truthful, if you attack honest people and if you exaggerate, that's going to yield really bad consequences. That was the argument. Okay. But if you say they are influenced politically, does that break down the relationship? I mean, does that break down the argument? I don't know. I don't know what this has to do with the argument. I mean, I'm not saying I'm going to eliminate it outright, but I would need to think about it a little bit more. But before you think about it, go down to the next answers and read them all first. Get into a habit of not spending too much time just ruminating about answer choices. Don't do that. Don't spend more than 5 seconds thinking about an answer choice after you read it. Because a lot of times you do that. Well, not you, but you guys. Like people in general, they just don't do that. Just when you're about to start thinking, just go to the next one. Social critics are capable of using their influence to shape public opinion. Okay, so what if we say social critics are not capable of using their influence to share public opinion, to shape public opinion, which means they have no influence on public opinion, right? Then his argument would make no sense, right? He was saying, hey, like, you know, there's going to be a vicious public sentiment if you do this, that. But what if you say they have no influence on public opinion? Then his argument falls apart. So this would be his assumption. That's why B is the right answer. You can try negating all the other answer choices, but it won't have an impact. It won't have a direct impact on his argument. Okay? So just when you see an assumption question, try negating them. Okay? And if the negated statement breaks down the argument as a whole, then that's the assumption. Okay? Okay, do we need to go over any other questions on this test? So, okay, if you have any questions on this test, write it on the chat, okay? If you don't, we'll never look at this passage again. Well, why would we?
This is
13?
13. No, wait, which one?
This 13 is the central claim.
No. 15. Wait. Yeah, 15.
The vocabulary question?
No, that's 14.
This one?
Yeah.
Every. All right. So what kind of question is this? What kind of question is this? You need to tell me within 0.5 seconds. Huh?
Words in context.
No.
Oh, effect.
There is no effect question.
Implication.
No, there is no implication question. We did this in essay class too. This is a purpose question. So it's saying, hey, why does he use every? I mean, although it does say effect, but that's what we do when we were writing essays. You remember that?
Yeah.
We discuss the effects and his purpose, right? So they go hand in hand. Effect and purpose go hand in hand, right? So how do you solve a purpose question?
You read and look at the meaning.
How do you do a purpose question?
Get rid of the obvious.
No. No.
Um,
Okay, so when you're doing a purpose question, this is very important. Okay? This is very, very important. 진짜 중요해. 이거 보고 있는 사람도 이거 진짜 중요한 거야. 그러니까 이렇게 생각할 거야. purpose 문제라고 그러면 if it's a purpose question, you're gonna pretend that these are his goals. You remember this?
oh yeah.
You're gonna pretend that these are his goals, and now you're going to use your common sense. So if my goal was to emphasize the point that all wrongdoing should be condemned, would I use the word every? Would this be my tool? Would this be a viable tool to serve this goal? That's what he's asking, right?
Yeah.
So so I didn't even read 21 and 22. I'm going to say, okay, well, you don't need to go back. You don't need to go back. Just look at the word every and just eliminate the obviously wrong answer choices. So if you wanted to emphasize that all wrongdoing, well, I like this word, all wrongdoing should be condemned. Yeah, you would use the word every, right? So this one sounds okay. Suggest a wish to appeal to the widest possible audience. Yeah, I mean, I would use every if I want to do that, right? It matters to everyone or something like that, right? Then it will be okay. Okay, so what about this one? Reinforces the notion that certain people are more likely. So if I were to make this kind of comparison, certain people are more likely than others, would I use the word every? That would be so counterintuitive, right? Do you know what I mean? Yeah. I want to say this group is more likely to become involved in a scandal than others. So I should use the word every. I don't see in what world that would be the case. Conveys the sense that evil deeds have become widespread. Evil deeds have become widespread. Okay, so that's okay, right? If you want to say they're so widespread, oh, I see evils in every street of the corner. Yeah, you can say that, right? You know what I mean? Okay, so now I want to go back and I want to read which part it is. Okay, so there should be relentless exposure of and attack upon every man, blah, 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 blah. Right? So this was this part when he was making this concession, when he was saying that it is necessary to clean the filth. We should do this. We should attack every evil man. We should attack every evil practice, right? So every evil should go. That's the point that he was trying to serve. Okay, let's go back. Every evil should go, right? Every evil should go. All wrongdoing shouldn't be condemned. Yeah, this is exactly what he was saying. Suggest a wish to well, is this like a matter of the audience? No, he's saying we need to condemn every evil person, every evil corporation, that kind of thing. Evil deeds have become widespread. No, he's not saying it's widespread. Maybe there's 5 of them. I don't know, right? I don't know how many they are just by looking at that statement. So this is not the answer. A should be the answer. Okay, any other questions in chat? No questions. Huh. Okay, so we're going to take a break. And when we come back, we're going to take a look at the writing section. So take a look at the writing section while you take a break. Okay? So I don't care if you got the question right. If there was an element of uncertainty to it, you could have gotten it wrong. That's what you need to realize. Okay? So Yeah, so think of, look over the questions and we'll go over some select questions in the writing section after we come back, okay? Oh. Sorry, just a second. Accidentally turned my computer off. Okay, so if you have any questions on the writing section, write it on chat. Okay.
3.
11.
Yeah.
16번, 19번. 31, 32, 36.
38.
Wait, I messed up. What am I doing? Why am I'm so confused. And what?
Oh, I said.
That's it? All right. Okay, let's take a look at number 1. When it comes to the main topic of the passage, make sure, okay, so something that you need to make sure you do is don't just put a sentence that's relevant. Answer the question. That's the big thing. When it comes to main topic where Beth sets up the information that follows, those kinds of questions, a lot of times, like, you forget about the question. Like, you read the paragraph and then you just look at this, and then you, like, some people, like, especially high scoring students, they act like this question doesn't exist, and then they just choose a sentence that in their opinion fits in. There will be some sentences that fit in, but that's not the question. The question is, what's the main topic, right? So I'm going to look at the rest of the paragraph. I'm going to read it. Preferably, I'm going to get all the key phrases. And then I'm going to choose a point that can encompass all of the points addressed. Okay? So as early as the 15th century, books were designed with ingenious devices. Okay, so in the 15th century, there were devices that allowed the reader to discover more on a page. So these devices allowed you to do this. That's in the 15th century. That's our first sentence. And then I go to the next part. And then it says, some pages contained flaps that could be peeled back to reveal hidden illustration. Okay, so these are probably talking about the devices, right? So it's elaborating on the devices. That's what you should tell yourself, right? It's an example of those devices. Reveal hidden illustrations. Others incorporated discs showing information. And then it says, at the height of their popularity, books with moving pieces contained elements such as tabs, interconnected stacks of paper, and illustrations, right? Okay, so it mentioned in the 15th century, right? In the 15th century, they had devices, and these devices allowed more on a page, right? And then we illustrate on It's basically detail supporting this, right? We go into detail about this. That's what we have. All right, so now let's go to number 1. And let's take a look at A. Toward the end of the Middle Ages, Europe saw the advent of numerous inventions. Okay, so if we say numerous inventions, if we were to choose A, this paragraph would need to discuss numerous inventions. But it's not necessarily numerous inventions. We're focusing on like one type, right? But and another thing is, it says these inventions revolutionized the technology of the day. We don't discuss this at all. This part, like, it's not mentioned. How did it revolutionize the technology of the day? That's just not mentioned, okay? So that's why A is not the answer. What about B? Throughout the ages, artists have expressed themselves through various types of media. Okay, then we need to talk about the various types of media, which is not true, right? Did they use books? Did they use like pamphlets? No, it's not that, right? C, bookmakers have long imagined ways to challenge the concept of books as static objects. Okay, so they have long imagined ways. So did they do this? So what's going to follow after this? Well, something like as early as the 15th century. This would substantiate the fact that they have long been doing this. They've been doing this for a long time. And they wanted to challenge the concept of books as static objects. Well, okay, so they're not static objects, they're devices, and they had like the moving pages and stuff like that, right? So this one is substantiated. Books have seemingly endless interpretations. Did we talk about the different interpretations? No. So that's why it would be C here. Okay, so number 3. Okay, so this one is asking for an example. Okay, so you need to choose another example. Whenever you have an example in a writing passage, you're going to have some kind of general point, and then you're going to have example 1, example 2. Like sometimes it's going to ask you, hey, what would be the best second example supporting that general point? In this case, it's telling us, hey, I already mentioned 2 examples. What would be example 3, right? So your hint would be 1, the general points, and then 2 and 3 would be the examples already mentioned, okay? So let's take a look at the general point, right? I want to see what the general point is first, right? Before I look at the examples. So at the height of their popularity, books with moving pieces contained elements such as tabs. Okay, so books with moving pieces contained elements. So these were probably, this is probably going to be encompassing all the 3 examples that we're going to be seeing, okay? So number 1, tabs that linked dynamic parts on a page, interconnected stacks of paper. This is number 2. And another thing, right? So we need to talk about an element of the moving piece, books with the moving pieces. Okay, so probably something physical, right? I don't want to talk about anything so abstract or whatever, right? What about A? So A says illustrations indicative of skilled artisanship. Okay, so we need to talk about the moving piece thing, right? So because if you look at the examples, it's like you have tabs in the book, and then you have stacks of paper in the book. It's like creative ways to have more information on a page. So so what if we have illustrations? It has nothing to do with the moving pages. So A is not correct. What about B? Elaborate fold-out displays. Okay, so this would be another example that would fit this because this is something physical that could be included in the books with moving pieces. So this one is okay. Themes, no, right? So I need something very physical. Clever poetry. Well, this is something not physical, right? I need something that's physical that could go along with the moving pieces. So that's why it would be B here. Okay, so who in the world got 4 wrong? Okay, so someone got 4 wrong. Okay, so subject-verb agreement questions. What's the first thing that you want to do when it comes to subject-verb agreement? The first thing that you want to think about. Okay, so you need to think about 2 things, right? So what's the first thing that you should think about? Yes, plurality, right? And how are we going to determine plurality?
Identify the subject.
Identify the subject, but how are we going to identify the subject then?
We find a noun.
Just find a noun?
No. I mean, well, because the question.
No. Not well because the question. No. Okay, so how do you find a subject and a verb in a question, in a sentence, in any given sentence? How do you identify the subject, verb, and object?
Well, you can identify the subject by finding.
Just intuition?
Yeah,
Just
there.
come? Okay, so that's where you could potentially go wrong, right? So when I was talking about how to find the subject, verb, and object, I said there's really no way. But I said there's stuff that are not going to be the subject, verb, and object. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
What are those?
Well, the subject
No, you're wrong.
is not.
No. Okay, so things that are not the subject, not the verb, not the object. So number 1, prepositional phrases. Number 2, what?
Adjectives.
Nope. Modifiers. And relative clauses. Okay. So strictly speaking, though, relative clauses could be they could be subjects sometimes. So be careful. But the relative clauses that I'm talking about are the ones that modify a certain noun. Okay. So if I take a look here, I see 1. Okay. So this is not a prepositional phrase, this is not a modifier, and this is not a relative clause. So this one is okay, but I see a prepositional phrase starting from here. Of the early masters of the movable book. Okay, so this whole thing is a prepositional phrase. So our subject is probably going to be 1, right? So we took care of plurality. So if we took care of plurality, I can get rid of A and C, right? So it's either between was and has been now, okay? Then I need to think about the tense, but when you're thinking about the tense, 80 to 90% of the time, you don't need to think about the tense. You just need to, 80 to 90% of the time, you just need to match it, right? You just need to match it with the sentence, like within the sentence, or you could match it with the sentence that follows or a sentence that comes before it. Unless you have a trigger word. Unless you have a trigger word for a tense. What would those trigger words be? Well, let's say, for example, I was explaining something. So I was talking in the present tense for a while. So like I've been talking in the present tense, but all of a sudden in one sentence it said in 1911. Then I know that we're going to be talking about a specific point in time, like specific point in the past. So now I need to switch to the past tense, right? If we're talking about specific events in the past, we need to use the past tense. What if I use the word since or something like that then? then I need to use the present perfect, right? Or what if I have by the time and then I have like a past tense or whatever, then this is going to be past perfect, right? So do we have any kind of do we have any kind of trigger words here? No, I don't think so. Then what do we need to do? I just need to take this, right? I just need to look at the next sentence I have invented. So I'm just going to be choosing the past tense. So was. Okay, so let's take a look at number 11, effective conclusion to the paragraph and the passage as a whole. So when it comes to conclusions, okay, one thing that you need to remember is you do not want to introduce another new idea. Do not mention another new idea. You wanna end it there. So if you introduce a detail that would entail some kind of explanation, something that would warrant more explanations, then it's not going to be the answer. You need to end it right there. So that's number one, always, when it comes to conclusions, okay? So don't warrant more explanations. But what is it asking us to do here? Well, you need to look at the paragraph and the passage as a whole. But strictly speaking, you should have seen this question come a mile ahead of you, right? I told you guys to check number 11, 22, 33, 44 before you start reading the passage, right? So what do I mean by that? Like, well, first passage, second, third, fourth. This one is question 1 to 11. This one is 12 to 22, 23 to 33, 34 to 44, right? So what I'm saying is, before you even start reading passage number 1, go to question number 11 and check if it's a conclusion or main idea question. If it is a main idea or conclusion sentence, it means you need to pay more attention when you're reading. If there's no main idea or effective conclusion question, then you can probably skim a little bit more, right? So check it first, okay? So you should have seen this question coming. Okay, so what was this passage about? Well, this passage, we've read, so when it comes to the main idea of writing passages, you need to focus on the very beginning, because usually the writing passages are pretty top-heavy, meaning they introduce a lot of crucial information in the beginning. They set up a lot of information that's about to follow, that kind of thing. So you should focus on the first part of the passage a little bit more, right? If you were confused here, it means that you were potentially when you didn't pay so much attention when you were reading the first paragraph, because the writing passages, they're infinitely easier than the reading passages, and I don't really think that you would have any trouble picking out the main idea for these types of passages. So just don't be careless. Okay, so take a look. Okay, we already read the first paragraph together. So this was about like this guy, right? I mean, okay, so this guy comes in the second paragraph, but this person made like moving pages and that kind of thing, right? And it was mostly discussing that. So that's all I have actually, right? So I mean, if we're going to choose a conclusion, I would say that well, first of all, I forgot the name of the person, but this person may or may not be able to show up, and we also need that what was this development that this guy made, right? This development itself was like the moving pages and that kind of thing, right? He made books. And there was a unique characteristic to his books, the physical characteristics, okay? So let's focus on that. But we also need to look at this paragraph. because we can't just look at the passage, we also need to look at the paragraph. So I'm going to go back to the beginning of this paragraph and I'm going to read this, okay? So movable books were works of art made largely by hand, assemble specialized materials. So this is how it was made. Once he was satisfied with the arrangement of the moving pieces, he provided the artisans with elaborately detailed instructions. Okay, so what are we discussing here? How he made it, right? How he made it. The process of his making. The process of his production. That's what we're talking about. The illustrations were produced through a refined printing process that resulted in beautiful colors and great detail. Okay, so talking about blah, blah, blah. However, the labor-intensive production kept the price of the books too high. All right, so up till here, we talked about how it was produced, right? The production of the book. And then we introduced this idea. The prices were too high. And then we have, fortunately, these incredible feats of engineering and artistry can still be seen. Wow, a lot of typos here. Be seen moving in videos on the internet. Okay, so you can see that. Good news is you can see that on the internet. Okay, so that's the idea that we have in the paragraph. We talked about the production and then we talked about the price. It was too high, but you can see that on the internet. That's what we have. Okay, so A says what? The internet is an excellent tool for learning about and shaping such important feats from history. Okay, so this one is wrong in the sense on account of it being only about the internet. Okay, so it did address some parts in the paragraph, but what about the passage as a whole? Well, we need to focus a little bit more on this person and this development, the moving pieces or whatever kind of thing. So A is wrong. What about B? Much historical footage, such as the 1969, is also... Okay, so this one, same reason as A, right? So this one, it does mention the internet, but we provided with another detail that only pertains to the internet, right? So we need to address this part, right? This part is not addressed. The passage bit is not addressed in B either. C, through modern technology, the ingenuity of an inventor. So this one, we have this person who used almost nothing but paper. Yes. Yeah, so this is what we've read about. And imagination has been preserved. Right? Okay, so this is modern technology. This is talking about the internet. So it takes account of the paragraph, and we take care of the passage, and the preserved bit is also taken care of in the paragraph. So this one is okay. Modern engineers continue to draw inspiration from M's movable books. Okay, so if you chose this as an answer, or if you were confused with this, you didn't think about the question properly, because the question is asking you, hey, it's about this paragraph. Well, first of all, where did modern engineers come up? Where did this idea come from? Well, actually nowhere. You only saw internet and then you made that jump. Oh, so the modern engineers looked at the internet? They can search the internet. Yes, that's true, but that's making another inference, right? So you're jumping. So you shouldn't do that, right? So C. Wait. 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Okay. Okay, so this one is asking for a logical transition from the information in this paragraph to the description of Maggie in the next paragraph. So we need to look at this paragraph, and we also need to look at the next paragraph. So we need to look at two parts, okay? So let's take a look at this paragraph first, okay? So where does this paragraph start? Like here? Okay. So we need to start reading from the beginning, right? Did you ever play Monopoly?
Yeah.
Okay. Monopoly. So it's talking about Monopoly board game, right? And then what is this saying? Blah, 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 blah. This one is just saying how popular it is, right? Saying, okay, this is a really popular book. Board game. Really popular board game. And then it says, Monopoly players use colorful play money to buy blah, 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 blah in a game board. Other players who land on the properties are charged rent. Okay, so this is explaining the game. These are explaining the game rules, right? So how it's played or what the rules are, right? Let's just say rules, right? So it's saying, okay, so the first idea that it said was it's popular, and then we talked about the rules, and then it says one player bankrupts all the others and wins the game, right? So this is how the game ends by rewarding players who are successful in blah, 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 blah. Monopoly seems to celebrate the cutthroat winner-take-all competition. Okay, so it says Monopoly celebrates the cutthroat winner-take-all competition. But whenever a passage says seems to, right? So whenever, we talked about this before. When we say like seemingly, allegedly, apparently, we need to be careful, right? So it seems to celebrate the cutthroat winner-take-all competition that many associate with modern capitalism. However, Elizabeth Mackey, the creator of the game on which Monopoly was based, wanted to, okay, so, well, the first hint that you get is that it's a contrast, right? So, the first part is saying, hey, it's celebrating modern capitalism, right? Celebrating modern capitalism, but Elizabeth Mackey, the creator of the game. Right, so let's see what she thought. That's probably going to be in the next paragraph, right? So let's take a look at the next paragraph, see what we get at, okay? Maggie was a follower of Henry George, an economist who taught that private ownership of resources common to all is both unjust and detrimental. So that's quite the opposite of modern capitalism, right? Such a system enables a lucky few, and while the others are exploited and impoverished, right? So this is, okay, right? So, she learned from this guy, but this guy had a very anti-capitalist notion, right? The purpose of the landlord's game, which Maggie patented in 1904, was to spread George's idea, as she explained. The game was practical demonstration of the present system of land grabbing with all its usual outcomes and consequences. Okay, so it was actually not trying to celebrate modern capitalism, but it was trying to say, hey, look what's happening, right? So it's actually just trying to kind of expose all the bad things that the system is doing, right? So that's how we should approach this transition question, right? So let's take a look. So A says she wanted to change the world. Okay, so, well, first of all, if it's a transition, the best transition is so let's say, for example, I have sentence 1, sentence 2, sentence 3. And then let's say, hey, what would be the best transition here? Then this transition in an ideal world would account for both ideas in number 1 and number 3. That would be the best type of transition, right? So what about this one? Change the world. Well, where do I get that idea in the first paragraph? Not at all. What about the next part? Well, next part, it's a little bit hinted at, but still, I'm not so sure, so I'm just going to delete this. What about B? Had something very different in mind. Okay, well, first of all, if we say different from what? Different from what's been mentioned in the previous sentence. So that one is good. Okay, so we took account of the idea before, and in the next paragraph, we talk about her anti-capitalist notions and that kind of thing. So this one is good. So I like it better than A. C, espouse certain beliefs about capitalism. So, okay, so capitalism, so I guess we do mention this idea mentioned before. So this is okay, right? So espouse certain beliefs. But, okay, in order for this to be the answer, the next paragraph would need to discuss how it espoused certain beliefs, facilitated certain beliefs. Did it? So I want to check this a little bit later. Did it create beliefs or no? Okay, so what about D? Shared her game with friend. Okay, no, right? Just completely irrelevant. It's about her making the game. So I just want to go to the next paragraph and change if this thing happened. If she facilitated certain beliefs about capitalism through this game. Do I have that? No, it's just talking. No. There were no beliefs created if you take a look at it. Okay? So this is more of an, so if it focused on the reaction that her game entailed, right? The creation of her game, it facilitated many beliefs about capitalism and how influential it was. If we discuss that, then C could be the answer. But it's not about that. So that's why B would be the answer. Okay. Well, first of all, we're not talking about multiple games. The only thing that we're talking about is Monopoly or the game that she made, right? So it needs to be a single game. And also we have the here, right? So it can't be C and D. So I'm thinking about A or B, right? Because these are the only singular ones that use game in it. What about, what's B? The properties what? Okay, so if you have a possessive, you need to have a noun after that, right? But what do we have? Games properties what? I don't have anything here, so it's B. Okay, deleting, should we delete this or no? Okay, so the mindset that you should have, okay, so what's the mindset that you should have when you're trying to add or delete something? Well, first of all, the cases that you can add a sentence are, number one, when it's relevant detail. You can add it. When it's bridging a logical gap. Okay, so then you can add it. Okay, so when can you delete it? If it's irrelevant detail, or if it undermines the claim. Undermine would mean it goes against what the author's been saying. It would actually hurt the author's argument. What's the difference? So the name of the game when it usually comes to add or deletion is being able to differentiate between relevant detail and irrelevant detail. So I've talked about this before, but the thing is, there's a very fine line between relevant detail and irrelevant detail, and I can't exactly pinpoint, I can't make a formula out of this, I can't exactly pinpoint this, but the thing that I told you guys, do you remember how to differentiate between relevant detail and irrelevant detail? No, you don't, okay. So if you have only one element in common with what's been said in the passage, then it's usually irrelevant detail. If you have two or more elements, then it's usually relevant detail. Okay, so this is not a rule, just, okay, so what do I mean? All right, well, first of all, okay, the example that I used before was about, so let's say we're reading this imaginary passage, and it's about Michael Jordan, okay? You remember this? Do you remember this? Yeah, so let's say it's like a biography of Michael Jordan, okay? Biography of Michael Jordan, and it says, hey, okay, so Michael Jordan was born in North Carolina, blah, 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 and then he used to love playing basketball when he was young, and then he went to this high school, and then he went to University of North Carolina, and then he went to Chicago, right? Okay? And then after the sentence, so what are we talking about? We're talking about Michael Jordan's career, right? So like his formative years. That's what we've been talking about. And then after the sentence, if I have something that says, Chicago is a popular city for tourists, would this be relevant detail or irrelevant detail? Okay, irrelevant. Well, based on what we have, it would be irrelevant. Why? Because the only common denominator that we have is Chicago. So I do see Chicago being in common with what we have, but that's not enough. And usually that's how they form it. Okay? If you have only one thing in common, when it's an irrelevant detail, you can sense it. But if it says in the next part, because it was a popular tourist attraction, that meant it was a popular city, so there were many people, and these many people, they went to go watch Michael Jordan's game. Then all of a sudden, this becomes relevant detail. Why? Because I have these two ideas now that are in common. Do you know what I mean? So but this can't be like a formula for you guys, okay? Like in terms of determining relevant and irrelevant detail, you always need to think about it. But another thing that often confuses students is that you always have this obsession with concision, right? You always want to make the passage as concise. They specifically ask you to choose like really, concise answer choices when it comes to grammar questions and stuff. So you're thinking about concision all the time, like in your head. And so when you're asked to consider deleting the underlined sentence, you think, okay, I can live without this sentence. I can live with, this sentence could go. It's better if it's short, right? So some students are in that mindset. You should not be in that mindset. This question is not about concision. That's something that you should remember. Okay? So it's not about concision. If, however, okay, so this is what I want to tell you. If it's relevant detail, it can always be added. Your mindset should be always, why not? Right? You should have a really open mind when it comes to relevant detail. Okay? So when you're treating relevant detail, be nice, okay? If it's explaining something, if it's talking about an example or something, that's always a relevant detail, right? Almost always, if it talks about specific examples, that's a relevant detail, okay? And another case where you can add or delete is if it mentions, if it's a good intro or conclusion to the paragraph, right? But in these cases, it would need to be the first sentence or it would need to be the last sentence, right? So if it provides a good intro to a paragraph in the very beginning, then it could be added. If it introduces like a good conclusion, then it could be added. It's okay, okay? But these only count when it's in the first part or in the last part of the paragraph, okay? And another thing is there could actually be some kind of general point, okay? What do I mean by that? Well, usually when we have a general point, we have an example or a detail following this general point, right? And usually they ask you, hey, should I add this detail or example, right? They usually ask you about this sentence. Should I add sentence 2 or no? And you should say, yes, it's detail, it's relevant detail, why not? But sometimes they give you the relevant detail and they give you a more general question, that general point that comes before it, and then they ask you, hey, should I add this? And that should be okay too, okay? All right, so let's take a look. All right, so before you before you read anything in this sentence, you should read the paragraph, right? So the paragraph says, in addition to the winner-take-all concept familiar to Monopoly players, Magic's original game geared a second set of rules, allowing players to share the game's properties, bringing equal benefits to all. Okay, so this, we're talking about this, right? So we did have this rule, the winner-take-all rule, but we're saying Magic's original game also had a second set of rules, right? And they could share, and they have equal benefits. But all this variety is the next sentence, okay? So, well, first of all, there's a gap here. If you just have two, right? If you just have two rules for a game, you don't really call this a variety, right? So you need something here. This is actually going to be an example of bridging the logical gap. There is this logical gap here. Why would you say variety if you just mentioned two rules, right? So let's take a look here. Players also created alternate versions of the game. Yeah, there you go. So it bridges the logical gap. It elaborates on that variety that would come after this. So A says kept because it provides an additional example of the variety associated with the game. So this one is okay. What about B? Because it supports a claim about Maggie. No, this one was not about Maggie. It's players created an alternate version. So it's not B, but it's A. Okay, 28. So this is a transition question. When you're solving a transition question, you should always read the sentence before the sentence and the sentence that contains the transition. And you want to figure out the relationship between the two sentences even before you start reading the answer choices, right? And the three kinds of transitions that are possible are continuation, contrast, and cause and effect, right? So you want to think about this consciously, okay? So the sentence that comes before this starts here. For years, workers have used a sprayable pea foam that is relatively inexpensive and easy to apply. Okay, so workers have used this, right? So this is what they've been doing, and the sense that I get from here is that this is an old, right? Remember that old and new frame that we used to talk about, right? For years, they've been doing this. Traditionally, they've been doing this. Until recently, they've been doing this. And then they say, but the new thing is this. That's the frame I'm anticipating. But if you look at the next sentence, it says this foam. So we didn't move on to the new foam yet, right? We're still talking about the old. So I don't need to say recently or whatever. I don't need that kind of transition just yet, okay? So let's take a look. This foam is made from a non-renewable resource, petroleum, and has been deemed unsuitable for use by environmentally conscious building groups. Okay, so this sentence is just talking about the negative, I guess, of the sprayable pea, right? That foam they've been using, it's really bad. That's what it wants to say. What about the first sentence then? The first sentence is they just use this because it's relatively inexpensive and it's easy. Okay? So this one, seemingly it's talking about the positives. So you should sense that, okay, so this is probably like a contrast, right? Okay. It's a contrast, but what about like, can we say meanwhile? No, like rather than meanwhile, you would need to go with something like however, right? Because that meanwhile is while something is happening, this also happens. Well, we're not talking about two things happening simultaneously. We're just saying there's the good side of this, but also there's this bad side of this, right? So I'm leaning towards however, but let's take a look at other answer choices. Therefore, okay, it's not a cause, because it's inexpensive and easy, this is deemed unsuitable and that kind of thing? No, right? Not this one. What if we don't have anything? Well, it's always better to have a transition, okay? So if you, this goes for also combining sentence questions. So also for combining sentence questions, it's better to have a transition than not have a transition. It's always better if you signal to the readers what kind of relationship the two sentences have. Okay? So relationship specified is always preferable to no relationship specified. Not the relationship not specified. So C would be the right answer here. Okay, so 31. All right, so this one, what kind of question is this? Matt?
Sentence structure.
Yeah, sentence structure. That's the first thing that you should think about. Why? Because I have a comma here, I have a colon and a semicolon. They all have different grammatical values, right? So like for example, if I have a semicolon, it means that I need to have a subject and verb after this. If I have a colon, well then I have some leeway, right? I can have a noun, I can have a clause, I can have whatever, right? If I have comma or, well, it really depends. It really depends, right? Because this or could potentially be used as a coordinating conjunction, or it could be used, it could be signaling the fact that this is a modifier, right? This whole thing is in a positive, right? This whole phrase that comes before this. Or it could say, or it could be a list, right? It could be anything, right? What about A? Oh, so this one is just using or without a comma, which would mean that this needs to be in a parallel relationship with whatever noun that comes before this, right? All right, so let's take a look at this sentence. Then the next thing that you should do is look at the grammatical value of the sentence, and you should annotate all the subjects, all the verbs, and all the conjunctions, right? Okay, so these groups are instead recommending. Okay, so we have a subject and a verb, right? We have a subject and a verb, but we have a comma, and then it's the beginning of a relative clause. Okay. It's the beginning of a relative clause, which is made from industrial scraps or cellulose insulation. Oh, and then we have another comma here, composed of recycled paper and natural fibers. Okay, so now, I think I've just used up all my imagination. So what should I do? Then I should just start checking the answer choices. I should start plugging them in and see if it goes along with my understanding of the sentence structures. What do I mean by that? Well, first of all, I want to check for the really obvious one. If I take a look at D, I know for a fact that I need to have a clause after this. I need to have a subject and a verb, since it's not a list, right? But do I have that? Cellulose insulation composed of recycled paper and, so this composed is not probably used as a verb. It's probably trying to just do this. And I can't just, even if this is used as a verb, I can't just have a subject and then put a comma right after that. So D is just gone, right? All right, so what about C? So if I say C, then it's saying that whatever that comes after this is going to be an elaboration on the main idea mentioned in the clause before this, right? So the groups are instead recommending cotton denim insulation. And then, well, we already elaborated on this, right? Which is made from industrial scraps. But if I put a colon here, then it's saying cellulose insulation. Just all of a sudden, it just gives us a noun. So what is this elaborating on? I have no idea what it's elaborating on. So I'm going to get rid of this. What about B? So if I choose B, what happens here? Okay, so I put a comma in front of or. Then what happens? Okay, so then this bit becomes this becomes an appositive, which can go, right? Which is non-essential, which becomes non-essential. So this clause can essentially be eliminated from the sentence. Then the sentence is going to be read like this. These groups are instead recommending cotton denim insulation or cellulose insulation. That's really good. We're talking about two types of insulations. I didn't know that until I've tried this. Okay? So that's how you should arrive at B, right? So the parallel thing, the parallel insulations are here, right? We talked about cotton denim insulation and cellulose insulation, and the blue appositive is there to just merely modify cotton denim insulation. So that's why B would be the answer. 32, set up the information that follows in the sentence. Okay, so for these types of questions, it's very easy. You just need to do exactly what they ask you to do and nothing else. What do I mean by that? Well, it tells you to set up the information that follows in the sentence. So I'm just going to look here. This is it. Okay, so requiring specialized equipment and additional workers. Okay, so probably, okay, so I mean, this could potentially be like a potential cause and effect, right? Or it could be some kind of continuation. But that's how you set up information, right? You say like, okay, why would you need specialized equipment and additional workers? Well, because I don't know, it's more difficult, right? I mean, it's like a really big job or whatever. So you need specialized equipment and additional workers, right? That could potentially be one reason. Well, anyway, let's take a look at A. They are less difficult. Oh, okay. If they're less difficult, why would you need specialized equipment and additional workers? That doesn't make any sense. It doesn't set up the information whatsoever. So A is not the answer. What about B? Cellulose insulation can be installed with the spray. Okay, if you can use a spray, why would you need additional workers and specialized equipment? I still don't see how that sets that information up. They're not necessarily as energy efficient. Okay, so if they're not energy efficient, why do you need specialized equipment and additional workers? I mean, energy efficient, well, that doesn't explain it. They're also more labor intensive to install. There you go. So it's more labor intensive. That's why you need this specialized equipment and additional workers. So it serves as a kind of a cause and effect to set up this information. Let's take a look at 36. Sets up the information that follows in the paragraph. All right, so set up the information that follows. So I just want to do what the question tells me to do. So I'm just going to take a look starting from here. A step pressure difference developed over a very short distance, driving winds to extreme speeds and contributing to the fascination of a foot-thick layer of rime. All right, so there was a pressure difference, and then the winds were going to extreme speeds, and then there was this type of ice, this layer of ice. And then it says the observatory's anemometer, a pinwheel-like apparatus used for measuring wind speed, had previously malfunctioned because of excessive winds and accumulations of ice. Okay, so with the new anemometer that was electrically heated, the scientists now had a device that could withstand an extreme storm. Okay, so they're talking about like this really weird phenomenon that happened, like with they got like this thick layer of ice, the wind was blowing way too fast and that kind of thing. Okay, so that's the only information that I have. So let's take a look how I can set that information up. So A says, facing the first day since crew member Robert Stone had been taken down the mountain for medical attention. Well, I don't, nobody cares about his bruised hip. Okay? No offense to this guy, but we were only talking about the climate and some of the equipment, right? Climate and equipment. So I don't really care about this guy. B says, but conditions worsened later in the day. Okay, so did we talk about this? Yes, we talked about like the wind blowing at extreme speeds, blah, 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 that kind of thing. As the two weather systems collided and encountered a formidable barrier in the presidential range. Okay, so that's like they talk about the equipment malfunction or whatever, that kind of thing. Okay, so this one is okay. And the finding they would make that day would lead to the recognition that a permanent weather station should be housed. Okay, well, I mean, later on in the passage, probably, I don't know, but it's just, this question is just about setting this paragraph up, like what follows in this paragraph. And we don't see like a need, we don't see a need for a permanent weather station established in the later part. D, the same conditions they had observed the day before, something relatively unusual for, did they see this condition a day before? No, that's not something that they mention after this point. So D is not the answer. So it would be B for this. Okay, so 38 is again asking for a transition. So what do I have before this sentence? What do I have after this sentence? So before the sentence, it talked about like the really weird weather conditions, the harsh weather conditions, and then we had like a thick layer of ice, right? And then after this, it says the observatory's anemometer, apparatus used for measuring wind speed, it malfunctioned, and then they had a new anemometer anchored to the roof. The scientists now had a device that could withstand the extreme storm. Okay, so they could measure this, right? They could, this condition was happening, but they had this equipment. So that's the thing. So A says, the staff members waited to see if conditions would continue to deteriorate. So this would fit. I mean, if you want it to fit, it would fit. But the thing is, does that provide an effective transition to the next part? We talk about the equipment right after this, but why do we need to know about the fact that the members waited and whatnot? So this is not relevant. Such conditions had interfered with weather observations in the past. Okay, so if we say this condition interfered with weather observations in the past, we connected with this idea previously malfunctioned. So I'm going to leave this. What about C? The safety of the staff members was of the utmost concern. Okay, well, we don't talk about their safety at all. D, throughout the day, the pressure fell and the wind speed began to increase. Well, we don't talk about that. We just talk about some equipment and that kind of thing. So B would be the right answer here. Okay, any other questions on this test that we didn't go over? Okay, then let's take a break before we go back to reading and take a look at another passage, okay? Okay. Let's take a look at this passage. So this one is the fourth, I think. Fourth passage. Surprising benefits of sarcasm. Okay, so again, it's not about the passage, it's about how you read it, okay? How do you read it? Well, this is our social science passage. This is supposed to be our social science passage. What do we do when we're reading social science?
We figure out if it's just explaining, like a process, or it's arguing for something.
Okay, so while we're reading, we're thinking about that because social science passages, it could either be opinionated, or opinionated means they argue that we should do something. But on the other hand, it could just explain a certain phenomenon or like report on a study, right? That's what we do when we're reading the passage. But before you go into the passage, you always want to build a sense of expectation. That's what you really want to do with social science passages, because you want to read them quickly. Okay, it's not necessarily. Well, you will get every question right. Okay, I mean, like all of you guys who are in this class right now, you guys should. And I mean, on this test, I mean, you guys got some wrong, but that shouldn't happen, okay? You should, that's pretty much a given. You need to get every question right here, but what's more important than that is you don't spend too much time here. You shouldn't, okay? You should minimize the amount of time you spend on this. Ideally, it should be like 2 to 3 minutes. Okay? So how do you build that sense of expectation? Well, the first thing that we can do is we could get it from the title, and this passage is one of those. You get it from the title, right? So what does it say in the title? The surprising benefits of sarcasm. So what is it going to be talking about? All the upsides of sarcasm, right? So there's going to be a point in the passage where we're done talking about the benefits, right? I don't know when that point is going to be, but when you need to start focusing when you need to start actually concentrating on the passage is once we're done talking about the benefits. But up until that point, we will be talking about the benefits of sarcasm, and that's pretty much it. They're going to be talking about studies. They're going to be, I mean, it can be through studies, or they can just tell us just right away. But I don't know. But after that, you need to pay careful attention, okay? So that it's that point, right? Okay, so I'm just going to just kind of hurry up until I use up all my expectations, okay? So how does it start? Sarcasm involves, okay, so it's just defining sarcasm for us. Because for our purposes, we need to know what sarcasm means. Okay, so what's the definition of sarcasm? Constructing or exporting contradiction between intended meanings. Okay, so I think the key here is contradiction between intended meanings, right? Intended meanings, like constructing, and then there's intended meanings, but there's a contradiction. You intend something else, but you say it differently, right? Okay, so it is the most common form. Okay, so most common, so this is something that I should take note of. Why? Because this is a comparison, right? Comparisons are something that you should always annotate, right? So this is the most common form of verbal irony that is allowing, okay, so what does it mean, verbal irony? Allowing people to say exactly what they do not mean. Okay, so this is, again, elaborating on this first idea. Right? So that first, what do we have? First, we have the definition of sarcasm, right? A definition of sarcasm and when it comes to the definition of sarcasm, we have two contrasting ideas here, right? So there's the intended meaning. but there's also exporting meaning. And it's saying these two things are different in sarcasm, right? Okay. Often we use it to humorously convey disapproval or scorn. Okay, so this is the first definition. The second definition that we have is we use it how we use it. Humorously convey disapproval. Okay, so this is just going to be background information though. I mean, so how do I annotate this? When I'm annotating this, I would just go like, okay, so this is number 1 and this is number 2, right? So these are the two definitions that I have of sarcasm. And another side note that you should get is it's the most common form of verbal irony. So that I took care of everything, right? Pal, don't work so hard, a boss might say, for example, on catching his assistant surfing the web. Okay, so how should you read an example? So I know we've been like skipping examples a lot, and I always told you guys, like, okay, if I just recognize the fact that it's a detail, you don't need to know it. Yeah, but also it can supplement your understanding. If you weren't so clear on your general points, if you were reading your general point and you had some doubts, you can use the example to confirm your understanding of the general point, right? And we see that here, right? He says don't work so hard, but this guy is actually surfing on the web. So the intended meaning is, well, you need to work. But what does he actually, what's the exported meaning? He says, don't work so hard, right? So there's that example. And then it says, and yet behavioral scientist LH, and then B and I. Okay, so there's 3 scientists have found that. Okay, so this is going to be the result, right? So there's the study, right? There's the study done by these 3 people. So what do they say? That sarcasm may offer in, okay, so it's not and, an unexpected psychological payoff, greater creativity. Okay, payoff, and then it probably needs to have a dash or colon, but I mean, it shouldn't interfere with your reading, right? Well, anyway, it's the benefit, right? They found the benefit, and that's greater creativity. So, what happened? Okay, so we know in the title that this passage was going to be about the benefit of sarcasm, and do we have it? Yeah, we just discussed it, right? So right now, the passage can go in many different ways. Well, one of the most common things that a social science passage can do is mention this, and then they state, like the study, right? They discuss the process, like how they conducted the experiment and that kind of thing, and then they, again, just reiterate this conclusion, okay? So that's what I'm expecting. But if that doesn't happen, we can potentially just move on to the implications or something like that, like why this is important, what else we need to know about this, that kind of thing, okay? So the use of sarcasm, in fact, appears to promote creativity for those on both the giving and receiving end. Okay, so we put on more information to this. So greater creativity for the giver and the receiver. So it's not just the person who's using it, but the person who's receiving it also. You get greater creativity. Instead of avoiding snarky remarks completely, our research suggests that used with care and in moderation, clever quips can trigger creative sparks. Okay, so it's just talking about the same thing, right? Greater creativity. So that's the idea that we got from the second paragraph, the results of their study, which is the benefit, which is the greater creativity. All right, so now I go to the next part. expecting what's about to happen. The most common thing that could happen, again, like I said, would be they mention their process, right? How they got to this conclusion. But instead, they turn to something else. What do they say? Early research. Okay, so we're not necessarily talking about this study. This is the new study that they probably want to talk about, right? Because this is what they're reporting on. And after all, he said I also, like he was involved in the study. But we also need to find out what early research said. So this is going to be a case of old and new, right? So this is probably going to be the old and this is going to be the new, right? So what does early research say? Into how people interpret sarcastic statements revealed, as one might expect, that most perceive such comments as critical compared with more direct utterances. Okay, so here we have a comparison, right? So if you, instead of saying something directly, if you use sarcasm, you think it's more critical. You think that that person's being more critical of you, right? In one study published in 1997, so I want to box 1997, right? When I see years, I always want to take good care of that because I don't want to get confused. I don't want to get it all jumbled up, okay? So 1997, 32 participants read scenarios in which, for instance, okay, so this is what? This is the process, right? So I just want to look for the results. I want to jump over the process. I want to just see the result. Consistently, participants rated sarcasm to be more condemning. Okay, so that, so early research, sarcasm, let's just say sarcasm condemning. Actually, that's wrong. This one they just said critical. And this one is the one that said sarcasm is more condemning. Compared to what? Literal statements, direct utterances, right? Compared to saying like you would, if someone says something directly, that would be taken as less critical, less condemning. But if you use sarcasm, that will be taken as more as a personal affront, right? And sarcasm can be easily misinterpreted, particularly when it is communicated electronically, according to the 2005 study. All right, so what did the 2005 study say? So the 2005 study said sarcasm could be misinterpreted. Okay, very simple. Sarcasm can be misinterpreted. They gave 30 pairs. Okay, so I don't want to read this. All right, so I just want to take a look at the results. Probably, I mean, I see numbers here, so I want to check if this is a result. 73%, but those who received the statements via email did so only 56, hardly better than chance. Okay, so it's obviously it's a contrast between 73% or 56%, but I'm just going to say, okay, so whatever. Like this result is there to support the fact that it can be misinterpreted, right? I doubt that they're going to have this general statement and then come up with the study that completely contradicts it. That's not going to happen. So it's there to serve the statements that came before this, right? All right, so and then it says the email, what is wrong with this thing? The emailers had anticipated that 78% of the participants would pick up on the sarcasm. That is, they badly overestimated their ability to communicate the tenor of these statements via email, right? Okay, so they thought, hey, they're gonna get my sarcasm, but what happened actually? Well, they didn't. This is an example of what? Expectation versus reality, right? They expected that the statements would be communicated effectively, but in fact, that was not the case, right? And the recipients of the sarcastic emails were even more overconfident. They guessed they would correctly interpret the tone of the email messages about 90% of the time, right? So they all overestimated themselves, right? So if we take a look at this, I wanna write here that I have that expectation versus reality, right? So what's the expectation versus reality? that they would be able to interpret sarcasm. But what was the reality? They could not interpret the sarcasm. They could not get the meaning. All right, so next part says in 2015, all right, 2015, my colleagues and I discovered an upside. Okay, so 2015. So my colleagues and I, so this is probably going to be an extension of the new study. So let me write it right here. Okay, so what did it say in 2015? Upside in this otherwise negative picture of sarcasm. In one study, we asked 56, okay, I don't care. Immediately after our participants, we presented them, okay. We also presented them, okay. All right, so I'm not going to read the process, okay? So like we said, okay, what are they going to say in the end? I know that they're going to say this, right? I mean, so that's what I'm just expecting. And if they ask you a question on the process, then I'm going to come back and read it. But for now, I don't want to do that, right? I don't want to get caught up in all these like manners, round, tennis table, these kinds of things, right? I mean, I know the results. I know the results. I know why he's talking about these and everything. So just go over that point. And let's go to the results. So it says not surprisingly, so perhaps this is our result. Let's check if this is our result. The participants exposed to sarcasm reported more interpersonal conflict than those in other groups. Okay, so they did have some interpersonal conflict, right? So this is not denying what the early research suggested, right? More interestingly, okay, those pairs who had engaged in a sarcastic conversation fared better on the creativity tasks. Okay, so that's also something that I expected because this is what they mentioned in the very beginning, right? So number one, yes, they had interpersonal conflict, but also they did better creatively. Creativity was there was a boost in creativity. This effect emerged for both the deliverer and recipient. Okay, so that's also something that we've mentioned before, right? So for the deliverer and the recipient, they did better with regards to creative tasks, right? But only when the recipient had picked up on the sarcasm. Okay, so only when is the same as only if, right? So there's a necessary condition to this, right? So it's not always there that their creativity was boosted, but some of the times. What do I mean some of the times? If this necessary condition was satisfied. What was the necessary condition? The recipient picked up. So the recipient needs to pick up. So this thing happens only when the recipient picks it up. So if the recipient does not recognize that the giver was being sarcastic, then what happens? The creativity spark did not happen for them, right? Okay. Why might verbal irony enhance creativity? Okay, so this now they're asking us a question. Okay, so why is this? So this is the part that I talked about. Okay, so in social science passages, you're going to see this a lot, right? You're going to build up an expectation, and then you're going to try and use that expectation to skim through the passage, which we did, by the way, right? We had this, the benefit. Like in the title, we knew that we were going to go for the benefit, and we did. And then it told us what the benefit was in really plain and simple language. So we got that, and we used that in order to breeze through the old studies, and then we got to this result. And then after that, we're talking about a brand new thing, right? What's the brand new thing we're talking about? Why? We're talking about the why. Why does this boost creativity, right? So that's my focus now, okay? So why does this enhance creativity? Sarcasm's challenges is that the message sounds serious but should not be taken literally. Okay, so there's a challenge. So it sounds serious, but should not be taken literally. One way to overcome this is through tone. Okay, so we need to get tone. That's probably why it boosts the creativity. That's how it's explaining it to us, right? As when exaggerated speech indicates the facetiousness of a message, we need to think outside the box to generate and decipher ironic comments. Okay, so we're forced to think outside the box. We need to focus on the tone, and that's why it enhances creativity, right? So we are forced to think outside the box because we need to catch up on the tone. It's not what's being said. We need to be able to catch the nuances. That's why it boosts creativity. Okay, so this passage, we had everything. We got everything that we expected, but what's something that we did not expect? Okay, so I would say this information is not suggested from our primary point, right? Or the title. And this information also is, we couldn't have expected this, right? And also this part, we couldn't have expected. And this necessary condition, also something that I could not have expected. So the hard questions would all be here, okay? Well, the seemingly hard questions would be when they're testing you here. And especially, okay, since we have this sufficient and necessary condition, they could potentially use this to devise a relatively more difficult question here. Okay, I think they did actually on this test. So make sure you know how to find the conditional statements and how to use them. Okay. Okay, so 32. All right, so I want to go over the questions on this passage because I want you guys to be able to do this quickly, okay? So again, if you feel like you're rushing yourself towards the end of the passage, it's not because you're slow at history. It's not because you're slow at science. It's because you spent too much time on the social science passage, okay? You're supposed to be spending a lot of time on the complicated science passages. You need to take your time there because there's a lot of information in those passages. But for social science passages, there's not that much information, okay? So you need to get used to doing this pretty fast, okay? So what's the common use of sarcasm? Okay, a common use of sarcasm is to, okay, so what's a common use of sarcasm? But, okay, so here's the thing. If you're going back to the passage for this, blindly, without any kind of expectation, 잘못 읽었어. Okay? Why am I saying this? Because, okay, when it asks you about sarcasm, the only thing that you can say here, like when it was talking about the background, are these two things only. Right? So you should have that expectation. You should be, okay, it's going to be one of those definitions mentioned in the very beginning because it's talking about the common use. The study had nothing to do with the common use, right? So you should have gotten that. If you did not solve it that way, then it's potentially wasting a minute here, okay? Like going back, reading, and that kind of thing. Okay, so what if you can't prephrase or what if you can't locate it? Then you need to read the answer choices first. Don't just aimlessly go back to the passage and reread that bit about the common use of sarcasm. That's the worst choice that you can make. Those choices add up and that's going to waste your time, okay? So what do I need to do? Okay, so ideally what should happen is, okay, so number one, it's this intended meaning versus exporting meaning being different, right? And another thing, use like humorously convey disapproval. Okay, so it's gonna be one of those two things, right? So communicate negative feedback, right? This has to do with the number 2 definition, okay? So if you couldn't do this, if you went back to the passage and actually read it, you wasted time, okay? So like I said, okay, if you can't do this, then force yourself to read the answers first, okay? So that you can at least go through a process of elimination and then go back and check it, right? You would say like, oh, okay, so like we didn't talk about like any anecdotes, alternative viewpoints, support, like if you start thinking here and say like, oh, this is an alternative viewpoint, no, this, like that's so wrong, right? So that's something that you shouldn't do, okay? All right, so next question. Used in the passage, which word is most similar in meaning to serious? Okay, so let's just check this. Okay, so line 34, serious. Okay, so half of which were sarcastic. So half was sarcastic and half was serious. So serious is obviously a contrast to sarcastic, right? So it's not necessarily... so they mean what they say. That's what the serious is, right? So where should we go here? Okay. So I mean, this one should be like really easy, right? Direct communication. We've seen that contrast over and over again. So if you did not see this answer right away, it means that you did not set up that contrast in your mind clearly when you were reading, right? Okay. 34, badly. Okay, so let's, actually this is line 43, right? 43, they badly overestimated their ability to communicate. Okay, so they didn't just overestimate it, they badly overestimated it. Like they messed up royally, right? So severely, right? It's not just overestimating it a little bit, it's severely overestimating it. You messed up big time, right? It's talking about the magnitude. It's not necessarily talking about like inadequately or whatever, right? 35, passage suggests that before the author's research. Okay, so when it says before the author's research, so okay, why did I underline this? But because I'm thinking, okay, so I'm going to potentially answer this with the old, right? Because this is the old and this is the new, right? So before the author's research, so this is going to probably pertain to this part. So if you choose to go back to the passage, which you shouldn't because it's a line reference question, right? So you should be thinking about that at least though, okay? So before the author's research, negative picture of sarcasm emerged because sarcasm can. Okay, so why did we have the negative picture? Why did we have the negative picture? Okay, well, okay, they have a lot of things like condemning, critical, misinterpreted, that kind of thing. So what you can choose to do is you can go through a process of elimination if you're pretty confident in your ability to retain information. But if not so, what you want to do is, oh, it's not a line reference question, right? It's a different question, the next question, right? Okay, fine. Then what you need to do is just go through it, okay? So emphasize people's differences rather than their similarities. Okay, so did we have anything, do you remember anything in the passage that set up a contrast between emphasis on differences instead of emphasis on similarities? No, okay? So you should be able to tell that this is completely irrelevant. You should be able to eliminate this as soon as you see it because you've never seen such a thing, okay? You need to be 100% sure, okay? You need to account for account for that. B, obscure the actual intention of communication. Yeah, this is possible, right? Because this is the contrast that we've been seeing, right? There's the intended meaning, and there's the exported meaning, and that kind of thing. So this one, just leave it, okay? Appear more prevalent. Okay, so then it does in others. Okay, so what is this comparing? Cultures. Okay. Did we do any kind of cross-cultural studies in this passage? Did we have that comparison? No. You should be able to eliminate that, right? We didn't talk about different countries. Introduce humor inappropriately at otherwise solemn occasions. Okay, so humor inappropriately, and then solemn occasions like funerals and stuff. Do we ever talk about that? This is also something that's irrelevant. You should be able to catch that. So just based on this contrast that we have, we can solve this, right? So B is the right answer. Which choice best supports the claim made by the author in line 64, 66, that a particular result of research was not surprising? Okay, so I need to choose an answer that supports a fact that something was, quote unquote, not surprising, okay? So based on something, okay, so based on a statement, there's going to be some kind of statement, and this statement is going to lead us to a conclusion that a particular result was not surprising for scientists. And I'm looking for this statement, right? So it's that simple, okay? So what should we do? All right, so now I'm not going to look at A, okay? Why? Because I know that A is going to be just defining sarcasm for me. In fact, I'm going to start looking from D, because okay, when you're doing the line reference, like I told you, you want to decide whether you want to go down or whether you want to go up, right? I'm betting my money that this is going to be towards the end of the passage rather than towards the beginning. Right? Because in the beginning, we dedicated most of the part to defining sarcasm, introducing the background, and that kind of thing. So let's take a look at 26 to 27. 26 to 27, it says, consistently participants rated sarcasm to be more condemning than literal statements. Okay. Wait, what was the question again? Sorry, which statement was not surprising? Just a second.
Claim made in line 64, 66.
Made by the authors that a particular 64, 66. Sorry. Okay, so 64, 66 is not surprisingly. Okay, so this was not surprising for them. The participants exposed to sarcasm reported more interpersonal conflict. Okay, so this one. So why was this not surprising? They had more interpersonal conflict. Why was the fact that them having interpersonal conflict was not surprising? So let's take a look at 26. Rated sarcasm to be more condemning. So okay, so if it's more condemning, would that lead to more interpersonal conflict? That is very possible. You know what I mean? So if you just hear sarcasm and you think, oh, you know, that person's criticizing me, he or she's condemning me, then that could potentially lead to interpersonal conflict. So that would be supporting. So I'm going to say D is okay. So I'm going to leave D, but let's go to some other answer choices. 21 to 26. 21 to 26 says, in some study published, blah, 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 rated scenarios. Okay, so this is a process, right? So of course you can eliminate this because this is like, it's not, it doesn't have anything to do with the findings. It's just the process. What about 12 to 14? The use of sarcasm, in fact, appears to promote, well, this is a good thing though, promote creativity. Of course, this is not the answer. And of course, line number 1 to 2. This is the definition of sarcasm for our purposes. So this is not the answer. So D should be the answer here, right? Okay, 37. Which choice presents a possible interpretation arising from the results of the 2015 study conducted by the author and the colleagues? Okay, so what's a possible interpretation? Okay, so what's our result with the 2015 study? So here we go, right? So number 1, more interpersonal conflict, right? When it comes to direct versus sarcasm, there was more interpersonal conflict to sarcasm, and this thing, right? Creativity increases if the recipient picks it up. Only if the recipient picks it up. So let's take a look here. A says people who perceive sarcasm well tend to be creativity. Okay, so so notice how, okay, so this is like a really unique question. Okay, actually this passage, the questions are not so easy. Okay, I mean they're not too difficult, but they're kind of they're presented in a kind of novel way. I mean, same as a 36. 36 was kind of unique because it's us supporting a statement that their finding was not surprising. This one's, so you're not going to find the answer in the passage because this one says, hey, what's a possible interpretation of what they found in the study? So we need to take this and can we deduce these facts? That's what we should ask ourselves, okay? So based on that, can we say that people who perceive sarcasm well, okay, so these are people who receive sarcasm, right, tend to be creative. Okay, so if the recipient picks it up, they said that this is necessary, right? Yeah, then their creativity would go up. Yeah, we could potentially say that. These two things have a correlation, right? That's what he's saying, right? So this one I'm just going to leave. What about B? People who frequently employ sarcasm tend to be logical. Did we ever talk about being logical? No, this is like a completely irrelevant idea. So I got rid of this immediately. C, people who enjoy creative activities tend to be combative. Okay, so this one is, no. Okay, so this one is just wrong because it's mixing up two different results. It's saying like it does promote creativity, but do we necessarily see any kind of correlation between this result and this result? No, there's no correlation here, right? These are separate results. D, people who see logical connections. Okay, so no, I'm not gonna look for logical. Okay, so the answer should be A, and I guess we have a line reference. Okay, so the line reference, I need to look for an answer that talks about the correlation between this and this. Perceiving sarcasm and creativity. Okay, so perceiving sarcasm and creativity. So this one, I don't know if I should start looking from A or D, but let's just say D. Okay. Because those were the endgame inferences, okay? So 68, this effect emerged for both the deliverer and recipient in the simulated conversation, but only when, so this one, yeah, this one is talking about this conditional statement. So this should be the one, right? I was looking for that, right? So that's the right answer. D is the right answer because it has those two factors in the correlation, right? What's the main purpose of the last paragraph? Okay, so potentially you can get a question wrong here because if you don't read this, okay, when you're reading this last paragraph, potentially things can go wrong, okay? What's the potential thing that can go wrong? Okay, if you act like this guideline sentence is not here, and if you just read this, it's you might seem like, oh, it's talking about sarcasm's challenges. Oh, these are sarcasm's challenges. So, we need to think outside of the box. See, it might even look like a problem solution or that kind of thing. Okay? So you don't want to be mistaken. That's why they made this explicit. They have this question here, and then this is like a guideline sentence, right? Guideline sentence mean like you guys know what this means, right? Guideline sentence means this. Hey, this is what I'm going to be talking about, right? This is what I'm going to be talking about for the rest of. I mean, for the next few sentences at least, right? So that's what we have, right? So this is the last paragraph. The last paragraph is about why does creativity? No. Now, why does verbal irony enhance creativity? So here it is, potential explanation, right? Why? So we need to look for the why, right? So if you just looked at some of the other sentences, okay, instead of looking at that first sentence as a guideline sentence, you could potentially choose this or something, right? Because it has the word challenge, but don't be tricked, right? Okay. According to the figure, which choice represents the approximate mean conflicted rating of participants expressing sincerity? Okay, so I guess we have, our number is, there's something called a PCR, right? PCR, but what's the PCR for expressing sincerity? Okay, so let's just go and check that. PCR for expressing sincerity, so here would be around 5. So B, right? 41. Supported by the data presented in the figure. Okay, so when you're doing this, a thing that you should be careful about is, okay, I don't think this is an issue for this question, but sometimes you make inferences, okay? So if I just give you like a number, if I just give you like a table, something that's quantifiable, right? Just give you a bunch of numbers, you can't necessarily say, hey, this happens because of this, right? You can't make that inference, and you can't say, hey, this is the best methodology or whatever kind of value judgment. You can't make that, right? So just stick to the data. If it asks you about the figure itself, just look at that. If it asks you about the passage and the data, then you can start making inferences, okay? But this one is just saying, hey, just look at the data presented in the figure, right? And see which one you can find out, okay? So let's take a look. A says participants receiving sarcasm had approximately the same perceived count. Okay, so we know that the PCR is the quantifiable thing. Those expressing sarcasm did. Okay, receiving sarcasm, expressing sarcasm. Receiving sarcasm, expressing sarcasm. All right, I would say they're about the same, right? I would say they're about the same. So, I mean, this would be the answer. But what about B? Let's just check other ones. Receiving sincerity had approximately the same rating as those expressing sincerity. Receiving sincerity, expressing sincerity. Okay, this one. All right, so actually I said this one is the right answer also for B. Okay, so A and B are both correct because this one, I mean, if you just look at the passage, like here, I can see somewhat of a difference compared to these two, but on the page, it kind of appears really like they look the same, right? There should have been a little bit more difference here, okay? So it doesn't really matter. But the other answer choices, they don't make sense. So A or B, they're both correct, okay? All right, so tomorrow we're gonna do the rest of the passages, and also we're potentially gonna do some history passages together, okay? Because the biggest issue on test day is that you guys are going to be pretty nervous. And when you're nervous, the the part where you have the most trouble is the history passage usually. You're doing it at the end. You likely used up like all your mental stamina. You don't know, you just kind of race through the test, and when you're doing the history passage, you're just kind of mentally drained and that kind of thing. So you just need to get used to the rhetoric. You need to be very used to the rhetoric of people in the 1800s, people in the 1700s. Okay, so if you want any additional practice, then I can send you some history passages. So those are stuff that you should be practicing for you guys anyway. Okay, and also, yeah. So I want you guys to try some history passages also if you don't have any other commitments in the morning. So if you can come, you can do some history passages tomorrow. Okay. So Connie and Matthew. Okay. Any other questions? Of course not. Okay, I'll see you guys tomorrow then.